Chapter 445. At the half-moon lake, the students were in class. Han Wulei couldn't speak, so she took out a sword and taught the students a move. The rest of the time was up to the students to comprehend. This move was taught by the young master. She didn't hold back and tried her best to demonstrate it. As for whether the students could comprehend it or not, it wasn't up to her. The students by the lake didn't look good. Finally, a young man couldn't bear it anymore and stood up. "Where's Mr. Qi? Why isn't he here?" Han Wulei didn't reply. The young master asked her to teach. She didn't care about anything else. "I'm asking you a question. Didn't you hear me? Why isn't Mr. Qi here?" Du Huanyan asked. Han Wulei frowned slightly. He suppressed the displeasure in his heart and ignored him. "Are you mutes?" Du Huanyan's eyes flashed coldly when he saw that the woman in front of him was still silent. The sound of the sword reverberated. Han Wulei's eyes turned cold. She suppressed her urge to attack. The young master had said that she had to act rationally. She couldn't casually attack others. "Du Huanyan, don't be presumptuous." A young man in a white robe spoke calmly from the crowd of students. "Bai Yujing, you're meddling too much." Another young man stood up and casually tossed the bamboo slip in his hand to the side as he spoke indifferently. "Let's go. I'm not in the mood to waste time with a mute whose cultivation is lower than ours." Jiang Yiqing sneered and turned to leave. The other students also stood up and prepared to leave. "Oh, is the class over?" Right at this moment, a red-clothed figure slowly walked over from afar. He glanced at the scattered students and asked. Han Wulei shook her head. Her cold eyes had clearly reached the limit of her patience. "No?"
Ha!
With an emotionless laugh, Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. His feet moved, and his figure instantly disappeared. In the next moment, the red robes after images flew. With a series of bangs, the figures flew up and were thrown into the lake.
Splash! Splash!
The students fell into the lake like rain. They didn't even have a chance to fight back. Their cultivation was sealed. Bai Yujing's eyelids twitched as she looked at the students flying into the lake. "You?" It was late autumn, and the lake water was bone-chilling. Jiang Yiqing, Du Huanyan, and the others had ugly expressions. They looked at the red-clothed man standing on the shore, and their eyes were filled with anger. "Since you don't want to attend classes by the lake, then stay in the water." As he spoke, Ning Chen waved his right hand. The willow leaves by the lakeside fluttered in the air and transformed into a sword wind that circled around the lake, sealing off the path to the shore. Once the lotus incense burns out, the formation will automatically dissolve. "All right, let's continue with the lesson." After saying that, Ning Chen glanced at Han Wulei, gave him some instructions, and left. "Don't hurt others. Use virtue to convince others." This time, Han Wulei understood and nodded seriously. "Let's go. Let's go. Let's go." To the east of the academy, Yi Qingqiu was in a pavilion in the middle of a lake. An hour later, Bai Yujing appeared and reported what had just happened. "Is anyone injured?" Yi Qingqiu asked softly.
No.
Bai Yujing shook her head. "Yes, I understand. You can leave first," said Yi Qingqiu. Bai Yujing respectfully bowed and walked out of the courtyard. A trace of confusion flashed through her eyes. She really couldn't understand the academy head's attitude. Ning Chen walked into the academy's Jingluan pavilion. He nodded at the scholars reading on the first floor and then directly went to the second floor. On the second floor, a petite girl with heavy makeup on her face was performing an opera on the stage. Below her, a few spectators were sitting in different postures, quietly watching the show. As the play reached its climax, the sound of the gong intensified and the tense atmosphere spread. The woman let out a delicate shout, and her sleeves fluttered in the wind. A gorgeous long saber appeared. The long and narrow saber was half the length of the woman's body, and it emitted a breathtaking rainbow light as it shot out. Seeing this, Ning Chen did not say anything and immediately retreated. However, Shui Xiu's saber light was hard to dodge. A whirlwind broke through the sky, swift and fierce. Below the stage, the spectators seemed to have already experienced this, and they retreated even faster, avoiding the saber's range. The Academy's three giants were the head of the pavilion, the old man guarding the gate, and the woman singing. Saber God, butterfly and the flower. Half of venerable, the name of Saber God. This name was said by a supreme venerable. It could be seen how stunning the butterfly and the flower was. However, there were very few people who knew that the woman singing in the academy was the butterfly and the flower. Not many people could go to the second floor of the Jingluan Pavilion, and those who had seen the woman's face with heavy makeup could be counted on one hand. Ning Chen was lucky. A month ago, when he came to the Jingluan Pavilion for the first time, he defeated the scholar and went to the second floor, where he met the butterfly and the flower singing. Ning Chen was also unlucky. When the butterfly and the flower sang, it didn't distinguish between the play and the play. The saber of the saber god was not easy to withstand. The saber danced in the sleeve again, making it difficult to dodge. Ning Chen came at the wrong time again. As soon as he stepped on the second floor, he met the saber again. The woman in red retreated quickly, and her afterimages were flying. However, the saber in the sleeve was even faster, cutting off thousands of afterimages and locking the soul. The sound of the gong became louder and louder, and the saber in the sleeve also became faster and faster. The woman in red focused on dealing with the saber, not daring to be careless. When the gong was about to stop, at the most critical moment, the saber was so fast that it was hard to see. Ning Chen couldn't dodge the saber in time, so he held the saber with both hands. The divine sword and the demon saber blocked the attack at the same time. With a bang, he retreated several steps.
Clang.
When the gong stopped, the sleeve stopped, and the saber disappeared. The butterfly and the flower stepped on the ground and landed below the stage. She walked to the side and picked up a cup of tea to quench her thirst. The continuous stream of saber in the sleeve didn't destroy anything below the stage. Her amazing control was amazing. The title of Saber God was not unfounded. Senior. Ning Chen put away his saber and sword and bowed politely. Senior? Am I that old? How many times have I told you to call me Miss Dai? Otherwise, you can call me Senior Sister Dai. The butterfly and the flower finished her tea and put down the cup, dissatisfied. Ning Chen was helpless. He couldn't call her Miss Dai, so he could only choose the latter. Senior Sister Dai. Junior Brother Ning, I'll take care of you. The butterfly and the flower and the flower and the flower and the flower stood on her tiptoes and pinched his face. Jealousy flashed through her eyes. Young people's skin was so good. She had to put on makeup to sing, and recently, she felt that her skin was not as tender as before. Miss Dai, since your little lover is here, we won't disturb you any longer.
Goodbye.
The three old men who were watching the show were not serious. They waved their hands casually and then went downstairs. The show was over. Instead of staying here to accompany the demoness, it was better to find a place to drink and talk about life ideals with the female teacher of the academy. When Ning Chen saw the three old men leave, he immediately had the urge to leave. This woman was not to be trifled with. Or rather, she was not easy to get along with. He couldn't deal with her alone. Senior Sister Dai, I just came to look for a book. When I heard the gong, I came to take a look. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. With trouble ahead, Ning Chen didn't dare to stay any longer. He decisively found an excuse and turned to leave. Chapter 446. Who says it's nothing? You came at the right time. Wait for me, we'll go out and have a fight. Butterfly walked into the inner hall. She washed off the dirt on her face and changed into a blue dress. Her hair casually hung down her back, looking simple and plain. Ning Chen waited outside the inner hall on the second floor, not daring to leave. Those who were qualified to enter the Jingluan Pavilion all knew that Butterfly was not to be trifled with. She was a true devil. The academy head had forbidden anyone from revealing Butterfly's identity because he didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble for the academy. He liked coming to the second floor not because he liked to listen to Butterfly's opera, but because he wanted to see the Saber God perform. In terms of saber attainment, Butterfly was already at the peak of the world. He was too far away. Of course, coming to the second floor was not a small risk. If he came at the wrong time, he might even lose his life. This woman was a madwoman. Especially when she was singing, no one dared to provoke her. Let's go. Not long after, Hua Zhongdia changed her clothes and walked out of the inner hall. Ning Chen nodded helplessly. He really didn't want to go, but he couldn't afford to provoke this woman. The two of them walked down the stairs. After 2 steps, Butterfly stopped. She thought for a moment and waved her hand. A ghost mask flew out of the inner hall and landed in her hand. Wear it when you fight. Okay. Ning Chen took the mask and replied softly. Wearing a mask wasn't much. Everyone knew that the second half-venerable of the academy was the opera singer, but no one knew that the opera singer was the saber god Butterfly. This devil's identity couldn't be exposed. His current identity was a teacher of the academy. He shouldn't appear at the same time as the saber god. The two of them went downstairs. The scholar, who was still reading on the first floor, nodded at them. Ning Chen returned the greeting. This person's cultivation method was a bit strange. He spent all day reading, but when it came to fighting, he was really hard to deal with. A month ago, he had only won by half a move. It wasn't easy for him to come to the second floor. Bookworm, if you keep reading, you'll become an idiot. Butterfly glanced at the scholar disdainfully. The scholar chuckled and didn't care. He replied, the book has its own Yen Ryu. Then wait for your Yen Ryu to come out. Hua Zhongdia replied and immediately walked out of the Jingluan pavilion.
Take care.
The scholar looked at the red-robed young man in front of him and smiled. It was not a good thing to be entangled by the butterfly in the flower. This demoness was good at harming people. She had no self-awareness. Ning Chen smiled bitterly and didn't say anything further before walking out of the pavilion. Outside the academy, Hua Zhongdia had just walked out when she kicked her shoes away. Her delicate little feet walked on the stone floor, and in an inch, she was floating in the air. Senior apprentice Sister Dai, your image. Ning Chen reminded her. It's my hobby. It's none of your business. Hua Zhongdia turned around and said. Then, she continued to walk forward in her own way. Where are we going? Ning Chen asked as he looked at the unfamiliar road around him. World Mountain, Saber Alliance, Hua Zhongdia replied. Ning Chen frowned slightly. Is this she-devil going to look for trouble with the Sword Alliance? He had heard of this place before. It was one of the top forces in the Central Plains. Although they didn't have a supreme being, they had 4 half-supreme beings. Senior Sister Dai, don't go overboard. The Sword Alliance doesn't have any grudges with you, so there's no need for you to stir up trouble here, Ning Chen advised tactfully. Who says we don't have any grudges? Hua Zhongdia turned around, displeasure flashing across her pretty face. She said, they dare to go around saying that your senior sister is too famous and insulted the saber god. If I don't smash their world mountain, they'll think I'm easy to bully. Ning Chen was helpless.
He didn't know what to say.
The Sword Alliance could have provoked anyone, but they had to provoke this she-devil. It was just a title. Was it worth fighting for? When we reach the world mountain, I'll be in charge of smashing the mountain. You'll be in charge of blocking those small fries. Don't let them get in my way. Hua Zhongdia opened her arms and walked in a straight line, swaying from side to side. There are so many people in the Sword Alliance. How can I block them all? Ning Chen said unwillingly. It was too much of a loss to provoke the Sword Alliance for no reason. Don't you want that heaven-breaking scripture? How many moves have you learned so far? Hua Zhongdia asked casually. 1.5, Ning Chen replied. After it's done, I'll help you with half a move, Hua Zhongdia promised. Deal. Ning Chen agreed decisively. Everything was negotiable if there was a reward. The sun went west. 3,000 miles away, a stone tablet appeared on the World Mountain. The Sword Alliance's headquarters, one of the overlords in the southwest of Zhongzhou, was facing the biggest trouble in thousands of years today. In the breeze, a blue dress appeared. Her fair feet stepped on the stone tablet of the World Mountain. Looking at the World Mountain Sword Alliance in front of her, her red lips curled into a dangerous smile. They had finally arrived. Behind her, red dress followed. She looked forward calmly, without any ripples in her eyes. Are you ready? Hua Zhongdia asked.
Yes.
Ning Chen nodded and replied. Then let's begin. Then, Hua Zhongdia stepped lightly and jumped up. She turned her palm and condensed chi. Vigorous true origin pressed down on the world mountain like a flood. In the next moment, a loud rumble shook 100 miles. The entire world mountain shook. The peak collapsed and rocks rolled down. How dare you? A deep angry voice came from the depths of the world mountain. A terrifying aura rose. A half-venerable appeared. Looking at the uninvited guest, his old face was full of anger. Hua Zhongdia, how dare you provoke the Sword Alliance? You're overestimating yourself, said the second leader of the Sword Alliance. Old monster, aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? Hua Zhongdia frowned and replied, Hua Zhongdia, pay with your life for your stupidity. At that moment, the space twisted and another half-venerable appeared. He held a long sword and attacked. With just you?
Ha!
Hua Zhongdia smiled indifferently. She took a step forward. Her blue dress was like an illusion as she dodged the sword. Below, the mountain gate rumbled open. Strong cultivators of the Sword Alliance flew out one after another, wanting to help. However, at that moment, Red Dress flashed past. She waved her iron sword and cut off the mountain. Huge rocks fell down and blocked everyone's path. Looking forward, a young swordsman held his sword horizontally and blocked the way. The road ahead is blocked. Everyone stop, said Ningchen calmly. The ghost face looked ferocious, like an evil spirit opening the door. His blood-red robe danced in the wind. His ordinary iron sword brought extreme pressure to everyone at that moment. In the distance, 3 half-venerables were fighting. Hua Zhongdia was fighting against 2 half-venerables. Even though she hadn't used her sword yet, she was still able to fight with ease. You dare to talk big with just this little bit of skill? Boring. Hua Zhongdia calmed herself down. She clenched her delicate hand, and a beautiful sword appeared. A wave of air spread out. The 2 half-venerables couldn't resist the huge force and were forced to retreat. Divine Heaven Slash, Hui Yang Sky Annihilation. Another half-venerable appeared in the air. A third Peak Saber Master appeared and used his ultimate move to attack the Blasphemy Sword Alliance's member. Suddenly, a sword appeared. Hua Zhongdia's eyes turned cold. Her figure flickered and her blue sleeve spread out, sealing her sword in it. When the other 2 Sword Alliance's leaders saw this, they also attacked with their swords. 3 swords, one of which was the God-conferred daughter. When the 3 of them attacked together, the battle became intense. Their sleeves danced in the air. They used strange steps and blocked the swords with their swords. The 4 divine weapons continuously clashed in the air. It was a dazzling battle of the Peak Saber Masters, shocking everyone. On the other side, the powerhouses of the Sword Alliance were eager to help the 3 alliance leaders and break through the barrier with all their might. However, the red shirt was extremely fast, flickering continuously. Sword gleams flashed one after another, blocking everyone's path. Your strength is really disappointing. This lady is tired of fighting. In the air, Hua Zhongdia's sleeves rotated. She held her sword and knocked away the 3 swords. Soon after, a beautiful sword light appeared. The God-conferment move reappeared in the world. Since ancient times, I will be the only one in 100 generations. A sword in spring and autumn, a beauty that can topple cities. When the Peak Saber Master appeared, heaven and earth shook. Suddenly, a boundless saber light soared into the sky and absorbed the saber light in the world. It spiraled and surged. In the blink of an eye, it quickly descended. The area within 300 meters was like a divine tribulation. The 3 Saber Alliance's half-venerables blocked the move. However, blood spurted out. The 3 of them were sent flying, their scarlet blood filling the sky. Quickly, go and get the Alliance Master. Among the 3, one of the half-venerables stopped himself miserably. He looked at the crowd in the distance and shouted anxiously. Seeing the 3 Alliance Masters defeated, the Saber Alliance's experts were extremely shocked. When they heard the shout, they immediately recovered their wits and quickly broke out of the encirclement. It's too late. When Ning Chen saw this, his figure instantly moved. He blocked the people breaking out of the encirclement with his sword, not allowing anyone to leave. Senior Sister Dai, can you be faster? Ning Chen was also somewhat impatient as he blocked the Saber Alliance's experts by himself. After he blocked another Saber Alliance's expert, he looked at the other side of the battle and urged her. Why are you rushing me? Can't you see that I'm busy? Hua Zhongdia replied. She did not delay any longer. She gathered her quintessence and chopped down. In an instant, the entire world mountain was cut in half. The mountain peak fell, and the ground shook violently. Her shocking ability impacted the minds of everyone present. Even Ning Chen's eyes twitched. This she-devil was simply too ruthless. Let's call it a day. Let's go, Hua Zhongdia said. When Ning Chen heard this, he moved his feet and immediately withdrew from the battle. He did not want to continue fighting. The next time I hear you old men slandering me, I won't just cut the world mountain. You're on your own now. While speaking, Hua Zhongdia put away her sword and turned to leave. Looking at the destroyed world mountain, the three half-venerables of the Saber Alliance had an extremely unpleasant expression. However, none of them dared to stop her. The sun was setting in the west, and night was about to arrive. The two hurried back to the academy. Hua Zhongdia stepped forward and grabbed the young man's collar. A dangerous light flashed to her eyes. She threatened, "Don't tell the academy chief about what happened today. Do you understand?" "Half a move more," Ning Chen said calmly.
Deal.
Hua Zhongdia let go of the former's collar and clapped her hands. After the matter was settled and the deal was made, the two returned to their respective residences. They would pretend that they never met today and never went out. In a small courtyard in a corner of the academy, Ning Chen returned. He waved his right hand, and the demon's sword appeared. He held the sword and closed his eyes. The battle of the peak of the saber replayed in his mind. Although Hua Zhongdia had a bad personality, her attainments in the saber had indeed reached the peak. She had reached the peak. She was even the only one. The title of Saber God was not in vain. In the next moment, red clothes flashed in the courtyard. The saber light was dazzling. Learning martial arts, integrating martial arts, and proving martial arts. Chapter 447. Withered vines, old trees, dim crows, small bridges, flowing water, people. The world has been in conflict for more than 10 years, but today, the old friends are back. In the desolate, tearless city, the princess returned. Her dark red clothes fluttered in the wind. Her eyes looked at the destroyed city, and her sadness was unconcealable. Wu Lei lost her voice, only speechless grief. The former glory princess, today the wandering mute girl, lingered in her eyes, but in the end, she did not fall. The city has no tears, people have no tears in this life. Ruined palaces and halls, carved railings collapsed. Everywhere was a mess, showing the bitterness of the battle in the past. A king at the peak, a glorious half of his life. In the end, he died in the undercurrent scheme. Lamentable, lamentable. Father, Han Wulei looked at the destroyed palace in front of her. At this moment, her heart was full of pain like a storm. At this moment, a woman in purple clothes appeared in the distance. Before she arrived, her powerful breath made people nervous. One of the 4 kings of the world, the Purple King, appeared in Tearless City. She stepped forward and glanced around, revealing a touch of surprise. Was it her illusion just now? She always felt that someone came to Tearless City. 100 miles away, a dark red streamer converged, and Hong Wu Lei walked out. Looking back at Tearless City behind her, she immediately stepped on the ground and quickly went away. Before the truth of that year was found out, no one here could be trusted. Academy, small courtyard. When Hong Wu Lei came back and saw that the young master was not there, she knew that the young master might have gone to the 2nd floor of the Jingluan Pavilion to watch the opera. She had heard of the actress more or less. She was a half-supreme of the academy, and her cultivation was second only to the head of the academy. She couldn't pass the test of the scholar on the 1st floor, so she was not qualified to go up. She had never seen this legendary figure of the academy. That day, she remembered the words of the head of the academy. However, it was not easy to get the young master's help. Favor, bargaining chip, she must be able to come up with one. She was not Ruashi, and she was not so important in the young master's heart. The word favor was unrealistic for her. As for bargaining chips, there were very few things in the world that could move the young master. She must think carefully. In the quiet courtyard, the fallen leaves fell. Han Wulei thought hard, and gradually the sky turned dark. Demonic wheels see. Suddenly, Han Wulei's eyes flashed with a dazzling brilliance. It was the only one. However, after thinking about this place, Han Wulei hesitated again, unable to make up his mind. Her young master wanted to find a power that transcended the mortal world. She only knew of this place, but this was a danger zone, a forbidden zone in the mortal world. It was even more terrifying than the primitive land. When she was young, her father had inadvertently mentioned this place. He said that if there were true immortals in the world, this was the most likely place. His father had also said that the heavens and earth were limited. The limit of a human being was the Xiantian realm at most, and not the true immortal realm. However, perhaps 30,000 years ago, or perhaps even earlier, there were immortals in the human world. True immortal was just a title. It represented those existences whose strength had broken through the limits of humanity. However, no one knew whether they truly existed or not. Legend had it that if one were to break through to the true immortal realm, it would be possible for a human body to fight against a deity. There was an immortal palace in the demonic Wheel Sea. The young master was looking for a power that transcended the mortal realm. Perhaps he could find the answer there. However, once he entered the demonic Wheel Sea, he might never have the chance to come out again. This place was difficult to find. Apart from a few top-level great sects, very few people knew about this place. As for Immortal Palace's location, even fewer people knew about it. This was the only bargaining chip she could take out. She didn't know how the young master would choose, but she hoped that this information would allow the young master to take a trip to the tearless city with her. On the second floor of the Jingluan Pavilion, the 3 seniors of the academy were still watching the play. Beside them, Hong Yu was also quietly sitting there. She had already been watching for an entire day. "Young man, you're still so young. Don't be like us old men who are always so lethargic. It's better for young people to have some vitality." An old man casually tossed over a jug of wine. "Many thanks for senior's reminder." Ning Chen calmly received the wine and drank a mouthful. "There's no saving him." The old man sighed. Just what kind of experience could make such a young man in his prime become like an old monster? He was so calm that it seemed he would never be impulsive. Miss Dai's performance is getting better and better. Below the stage, another old man opened his mouth and praised. "Young man, what is your goal in coming to the academy?" asked a third old man. "The academy had personally invited me, so I had no choice but to come. In addition, I came to find the heavenly book and borrow its power to attack the 3 calamities," said Ning Chen honestly. "Your strength is already enough to look down on the world. Why must you seek your own death? You should know that with your killing karma, it's impossible for you to pass through the true karmic flame calamity. After all, this world won't allow someone like you to exist," said the third old man. "I need to find the power above the mortal world. My current strength isn't enough." Ning Chen replied as he drank the wine in the jar.
"Why?"
asked the first old man. "To save someone," said Ning Chen. "Someone who's already dead?" asked the old man. "Yes." Ning Chen was silent for a moment before nodding. "The word love is to harm others and harm oneself." The old man didn't ask any more questions. The tribulations this young man would have to face in the future would definitely be unprecedentedly terrifying. The tribulation of love, the tribulation of the devil, and the tribulation of all living beings. As for the tribulation of the devil and the tribulation of all living beings, there was almost no chance of him avoiding them. Clang, clang, clang. The sounds of gongs and drums were hurried. Today's show was coming to an end. Ning Chen put down the wine in his hand and stood up to grab his saber. His feet moved, and his silhouette flashed forward. The demonic saber turned sharp and met the saber head-on. The two swords clashed with a loud clanging sound. Amidst the flashes of lightning, a dazzling light flashed past. Amidst the long dance of her sleeves, the beautiful swords were graceful. With a ripping sound, her red clothes were torn apart. Drops of blood silently slid down and dyed the stone floor red. Below the stage, the three old men silently observed. Their eyes flashed with admiration. This kid was indeed a true madman. In the past, he had been at the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Today, he might have been at the pinnacle of swordsmanship. In just a few short months, they had witnessed the rapid growth of a madman. Learning martial arts, integrating martial arts, proving martial arts. His speed was shocking. It wasn't because of how high his talent was, but his courage and willpower were something that no one could compare to. The Saber God's martial arts demonstration was indeed the best opportunity to learn. However, to dare to spar with the Saber God and learn martial arts faster, one must have courage that was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Hua Zhongdia was also a madman. She would not show mercy to anyone. Since she had the guts to come forward, it was her fortune to be alive, but if she died, it was her fate. If it had been when they were young, even if they had such an opportunity, they wouldn't have been able to make such a decision. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of the drum became more and more urgent. Today's show seemed to be especially long. Hong Yi's injuries were increasing. Without using a sword and only using a saber, who would dare to go against the Saber God?
Dong.
The last beat of the drum ended. Hong Yi was sent flying and crashed into the wall. Blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. She had lost once again. The play on the stage came to an end, and Butterfly in the Flower regained her senses. She gracefully stepped off the stage and took the wine that Ning Chun had just drunk. She didn't mind and directly took a sip. She said, "You've improved quite a bit, but you still need more practice. Senior Sister Dai, thank you for your guidance." Ning Chun wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth.
Don't die.
Hua Zhongdia's tone became serious. It was rare for her to be serious. She admired this kid. Whether it was a saber or a sword, they all needed to be tempered thousands of times to become the only one. Nowadays, young people were too impetuous. There were fewer and fewer madmen like this one. One had to be a little bit obsessed. Whether it was love or martial arts, if one wanted to get something without putting in effort, one would end up at a disadvantage. Yes. Ning Chun nodded. He wouldn't die before finding a way to save the ghost girl. No one could take his life. Senior Sister Dai, 3 seniors, it's getting late. I'll go back first. The show was over. Ning Chun didn't stay any longer. He politely bowed to the 4 and immediately went downstairs. You 3 old men, shouldn't you go too? Are you waiting for me to change clothes? Hua Zhongdia glanced at the 3 old men and said indifferently, "Ah, we don't dare.
Goodbye."
The 3 stood up, patted their clothes, and immediately went downstairs. After the 4 of them left, Butterfly in the Flower walked back to the inner hall. She took off her costume, washed her makeup, and changed into a blue dress. Then, she looked in front of the mirror and did her makeup. Her delicate face made it hard for people to tell that she was actually a formidable master whose strength was close to that of a supreme master. Ning Chun stepped back into the small courtyard. Han Wulei was still waiting in the courtyard. Seeing him come back, she stepped forward and bowed. "What's the matter?" asked Ning Chun calmly. He could see that this woman had a request. Han Wulei held her sword and wrote a dozen words on the ground in front of her. When Ning Chun saw the words "Devil will see," his eyes flashed. This was the first time he had heard of this name. However, Han Wulei knew what he was looking for. Ordinary things were meaningless to him. "What is there here?" asked Ning Chun. "Immortal Palace." Han Wulei wrote another 2 words. "Immortal?" Ning Chun narrowed his eyes. Were there really immortals in this world? Up until now, no one in the 5 regions had been able to cross that dragon gate. The limit of a human was the Xiantian realm, and it was impossible to become a true immortal. "If what you said is true, then I'll go with you to Wulei City." Ning Chun withdrew his thoughts and promised. Han Wulei's eyes flashed with excitement. She once again respectfully bowed, thanking the young master for his kindness. Ning Chun stood in place, his eyes looking into the distance. Immortal Palace? He could only pray to the heavens that there really were immortals in this world. On the western side of the Central Plains, the imperial court was at war. Horse hooves galloped, and the flames of war continued for thousands of miles. The world was glorious, and the world was in chaos. Correspondingly, 1,000 years of hegemony, 100 victories, and voices rose from all directions. At this moment, two figures walked over from the distance amidst the chaotic flames of war. Behind them was a young girl with a sword on her back. Her appearance was pretty, and her aura was clean. Her sword heart was clear. In front of her was Jian Shisui, dressed in luxurious azure clothes. He slowly walked through the flames of war. His eyes were calm, but there was also a faint loneliness. The distant figures gradually disappeared from the flames of war. From start to finish, they never stopped. In the vast territory, in the glorious great world, there was no one to prove the sword. Legends were silent, and it was difficult to find an opponent to spar with. The wild sand covered thousands of miles, and the mountains were hazy. The lonely experts disappeared without a trace. Chapter 448. In the pavilion at the center of the lake, ripples reflected the moon. Ning Chun and the head of the academy sat facing each other. 2 cups of tea wafted through the air. Hearing the young man's question, the head of the academy was silent. Looking at the tea in her cup, faint ripples flickered through her beautiful eyes. Ning Chun calmly waited. He wasn't in a rush. Han Wulei didn't know much about the Devil Wheel Sea and Immortal Palace. He came to ask the head of the academy in hopes of hearing more information. Immortal Palace truly does exist. After a long time, I Chingqiu sighed and said, however, that is a dangerous place. Once you enter the Devil Wheel Sea, it will be difficult to leave. Are there really immortals in this world? Asked Ning Chun seriously. There might have been in the past. I Chingqiu nodded. Since the world can produce existences like the 4 symbols divine spirits, that means the upper limit of this world isn't just Xiantian. Perhaps true immortals truly did exist before. However, in the past 10,000 years, those who entered Immortal Palace have pretty much all died inside. No one came out alive. Ning Chun picked up his tea and took a sip. There was one. However, after coming out, he went crazy, replied I Chingqiu. Ning Chun was silent. It seemed like this place really was an extremely dangerous place. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't act blindly, without thinking. Although there might be power that surpasses the mortal world within Immortal Palace, the risk is too great. Even a supreme expert at the consummate level cannot escape. Right now, there is still quite a bit of a difference between you and a supreme expert. Entering will only lead to death, advised I Chingqiu seriously. Many thanks for the head of the academy for warning me. I won't be impulsive. Ning Chun nodded. He wouldn't throw away his life for no reason, but he also wouldn't do nothing. Since Immortal Palace's existence was still a secret few people knew about, then he might as well start from there. Head of the academy, I will be returning to Tearless City with Wulei soon. I need to ask for a few days of leave. I hope the head of the academy can approve, said Ning Chun. You can go, replied I Chingqiu. With this matter settled, Ning Chun got up and was about to leave. Suddenly, the world in the distance shook. A powerful aura descended from the sky. A terrifying pressure shocked the 9 heavens. I Chingqiu's expression changed. Her figure flickered, and she instantly appeared in the sky. Her palm faced the divine might that descended. Great rumbling sounds rang out. The entire world trembled. Wave after wave of remnant might swept outwards. The space in the horizon collapsed. Supreme beings clashed. Heaven and earth were horrified. The white-robed man standing in the air exuded an abnormally terrifying aura. He did not seem like a human being, and the pressure he exuded was cold and heart-palpitating. Energy shaping realm wild beast. In the pavilion, Ning Chen's eyes flashed with a heavy expression. The calamity of the primitive lands still appeared. How troublesome. The two venerables began their battle. Heaven and earth changed color, and the remaining shockwaves rippled outwards. At the entrance of the academy, the elder guarding the gate opened his eyes. With a step, he entered the battlefield. At the same time, on the first floor of the Jingluan pavilion, the scholar put down the book in his hand, picked up a wooden stick, and walked out of the Jingluan pavilion. As the two of them joined the battle became even more intense. Down below, the three seniors of the academy watched the battle quietly, ready to take action at any time. Inside the academy, the protective formation that had been continuously reinforced by the past academy heads was activated, blocking the aftermath of the great battle. It rumbled and shook everything within 100 miles. Outside the pavilion in the middle of the lake, Hua Zhongdia walked over and sat down in the pavilion, drinking tea while watching the play. "Senior Sister Dai, aren't you going to take action?" Ning Chen asked casually. "The academy head said that unless she's not in the academy, I'm not allowed to show my face," Hua Zhongdia replied in boredom. "What about you? Aren't you going to take action?" Hua Zhongdia took a sip of tea and asked. "I just broke into the Kaiyang Palace not long ago. It's better to take action as little as possible to avoid suspicion," Ning Chen replied. "That makes sense." Hua Zhongdia nodded. "Why do you think this energy-shaping realm wild beast came out? What kind of trouble can he cause by himself?" Hua Zhongdia took the teapot and poured herself another cup of tea. On the surface, the academy had one venerable and two half-venerables. It was more than enough to deal with an energy-shaping realm wild beast. There are two possibilities. One is to investigate the academy, and the other is to attract the academy's attention, Ning Chen replied. "Which one do you think it is?" Hua Zhongdia asked. "The latter one," Ning Chen replied. "So, someone doesn't want the academy to find out?" Hua Zhongdia understood. A glint flashed in her eyes as she said. "Most likely," Ning Chen said. "How about we split up?" Hua Zhongdia asked. "Half a move more," Ning Chen said. "Deal," Hua Zhongdia agreed. "I'll go to the Kaiyang Palace. Sister Dai, go to the back mountain of the academy. We'll meet at the academy before dawn." Ning Chen stood up and said. "Okay." Hua Zhongdia put down the teacup in her hand and replied. The two left separately. Not long after, red clothes flashed across White Emperor City and disappeared in an instant. Kaiyang Palace, Central Heavenly Court. The primitive emperor sat cross-legged in the endless fate. His aura was getting stronger and stronger, infinitely close to the venerable realm. In front of him, the old eunuch was guarding. Half of his horsetail whisk was glaring with silver light. Above the palace, red light gathered and stood in the void. Looking at the figure in the central heavenly court, his eyes narrowed slightly. There was indeed a problem here. Borrowing the fate of a dynasty to hide the movement of stepping into the venerable realm could hide it from others, but it was impossible to hide it from the academy head, who was also a venerable. However, at this time, the academy head was fighting with the energy-shaping realm wild beast from the primitive land. His attention was diverted, and he had no time to pay attention to this. All the signs now all pointed to the fact that the primitive emperor had a deal with the primitive land. His purpose was to deal with the academy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. On this point, the primitive emperor and the primitive land had a common goal. It was not impossible for them to form an alliance. If this was the case, the primitive emperor was really hateful. The energy-shaping realm wild beast of the primitive land had always wanted to break through the shackles of the academy and return to the human world. Once something happened to the academy head, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing that the primitive emperor was about to step into the complete realm, Ning Chen no longer hesitated. With a clench of his left hand, the Deathbreaker appeared. 3 red arrows condensed. The next moment, 3 arrows were shot out in succession. Shocking power, a dazzling blood light was drawn across the sky. The sudden arrow light came, without warning. In front of the primitive emperor, the old eunuch's expression sank. The silver threads of the horsetail whisk in his hand spread out and blocked the first 2 arrows. However, the 3rd arrow light came soon after. It broke through the horsetail whisk's obstruction and swept towards the primitive emperor who was at the most critical moment of his cultivation. The old eunuch's figure flashed, and his other hand grabbed the arrow body. With a bang, the arrow light shattered. But unexpectedly, after the 3rd arrow, another arrow light passed by silently and arrived in front of the Yuan emperor. At the critical moment, the primitive emperor suddenly opened his eyes. Protective Zhen Yuan swayed out and blocked the arrow light. At the same time, the Zhen Qi in his body surged in the opposite direction. In front of the Zhizun, all his efforts were in vain. The primitive emperor's face flashed ferociously. He took a step and flew out of the central heavenly court, but he could no longer find the shadow of the person who shot the arrow. Zhao Clan. The primitive emperor clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He and the Zhao clan had always minded their own business. He never thought that the Zhao clan would stab him in the back at the most critical moment. When the sky was about to brighten, Ning Chen and Hua Zhongjie returned at the same time in the Jingluan pavilion. Seeing the weary academy head in the pavilion, they looked at each other and stopped. "Let's talk on the 2nd floor," Yi Qingqiu said and immediately turned to go upstairs. "Did you find anything?" Hua Zhongjie followed and transmitted her voice while walking. "The primitive emperor has a problem. What about you?" Ning Chen replied and asked the same question. "I was worried about being discovered, so I didn't dare to go too deep." "I didn't find anything unusual," Hua Zhongjie replied. "What did the academy head say?" Ning Chen asked. "Just tell the truth." "We didn't do anything shameful," Hua Zhongjie replied. "I did. The primitive emperor wanted to break through to the Zhizun realm. I shot him down from the Zhizun realm with an arrow." Ning Chen glanced at the academy head in front of him and transmitted his voice. Hua Zhongjie was surprised. This kid really dared to do anything. Before there was any evidence, the academy and the Kaiyang dynasty were still on friendly terms. This arrow was really something. However, she liked it. "Did you leave any evidence?" Hua Zhongjie asked. "No, I used the bow of the Zhao clan. We'll talk about the origin of the bow in the future." "The primitive emperor shouldn't suspect the academy," Ning Chen replied. "Then it's fine. If the academy head blames us, I'll help you." Hua Zhongjie nodded and said righteously, "Just shoot. Isn't it just a primitive emperor?" Ning Chen did the right thing. It's better to measure the heart of a gentleman with one's own yardstick than to let the potential enemy grow stronger. While the two were transmitting their voice, they had unknowingly reached the 2nd floor. The academy had turned around and looked at the two. He asked, "Where did you go?" "I went to the back mountain and he went to the Kaiyang Imperial Palace. It was his idea. He said that there might be problems in these 2 places." Hua Zhongjie pointed at the person beside her and said first. Her righteous senior sister betrayed someone without loyalty. Ning Chen was stunned. He looked at the woman who just vowed to help him. At this moment, he didn't know what to say. A woman's words really couldn't be trusted. Yi Qingqiu knew Hua Zhongjie's bad character better than anyone else. She automatically ignored the latter half of the sentence and looked at Ning Chen. She asked, "What did you find?" "The primitive emperor was breaking through to the Zhizun realm and was shot down by me. But I didn't leave any evidence." "The primitive emperor won't suspect the academy." Ning Chen withdrew his gaze and said helplessly. Hearing this, Yi Qingqiu frowned slightly. The academy had always had a good relationship with the Kaiyang Imperial Palace. Although they were suspicious of the primitive emperor, it was only a suspicion. There was no evidence. "There's nothing on my side. I didn't do anything," Hua Zhongjie said before the academy had asked. Yi Qingqiu thought for a while and looked at the two. She said seriously, "Anyway, you two go out and hide for a few days. Ning Chen, aren't you going to the Tearless City? You can take this opportunity to solve the problem there. In addition, keep an eye on Hua Zhongjie. Don't let her cause trouble everywhere."
"Sure."
Ning Chen glanced at Hua Zhongjie beside him and replied with a faint smile. "Hua Zhongjie, during these days when you leave the academy, you have to listen to Ning Chen. Don't let me hear that you caused trouble outside again. Yi Qingqiu looked at Hua Zhongdia and warned. Although Hua Zhongdia was very unwilling, she didn't dare to disobey the academy head at this moment. She nodded unhappily. Chapter 449. In the northwest of the academy, the three of them were walking in the vast wilderness. A certain person who had been driven out of the academy to avoid trouble had been walking for 2 days. Ningchen was not familiar with the tearless city. Hua Zhongdia was familiar with Hongwulei, but she could not talk about it. So, as the three of them walked, Hongwulei wrote down the situation of the tearless city and what had happened that year. Don't think about it. The other 3 kings can't get away with it. Hua Zhongdia, who was walking in front with bare feet, turned around and said, "They are indeed suspicious." Ningchen nodded. With King Red's strength, Yi Shi could not defeat him. Even the shopkeeper of the sect of extermination of life and death might not succeed. In terms of gains and losses, the other 3 kings were most likely to hire assassins. Moreover, King Red's cultivation was not ordinary. If he was not schemed against or sneak attacked, it was hard to kill him. By the way, you haven't told me how you got the bow of the Zhao family. Hua Zhongdia suddenly thought of this and asked. It's a long story. Ningchen answered casually. Then tell me slowly. Hua Zhongdia obviously did not want to miss the opportunity to listen to the story. Ningchen thought for a while and said, in the past, someone from the Zhao family wanted to kill me. Later, I killed him. Then the bow fell into my hands.
Wow.
Hua Zhongdia pretended to be surprised and sighed. Then a trace of disdain flashed in her eyes. She said, "It's really long." Ningchen did not want to waste time on this boring thing. He changed the topic and said, "It's not a big deal. You should think about how to hide your identity in the tearless city." "It's your business. I don't care. The academy head said that I should listen to you." Hua Zhongdia shirked her responsibility. "Don't go out, and don't take a step out." Ningchen suggested, "In your dreams." Hua Zhongdia rejected directly. "Didn't you just say that you should listen to me?" Ningchen looked at the ancient city in the distance and said, "If it's reasonable, I will listen. If it's unreasonable, I won't listen." Hua Zhongdia changed her decision and did not feel embarrassed at all. Ningchen also knew that he couldn't argue with this girl who looked like the girl next door, but was actually a pure she-devil. He brought up a new suggestion and said, "Actually, I have a cultivation method called the Rui method. It can change one's appearance without being noticed by others." However, at the end, Ningchen stopped talking and didn't continue. Up ahead, Hua Zhongdia's eyes lit up. Good stuff. Once she learned this skill, she would be able to do whatever she wanted. Thinking of this, Hua Zhongdia stopped and waited for Ningchen to walk up to her. She put her arm around his shoulder and smiled. "Ningchen, how do you think senior sister usually treats you?" "Average, very average," Ningchen said indifferently. Hua Zhongdia pretended that she didn't hear him and continued, "Teach me your cultivation technique, and I'll help you teach the academy head half a move." "You still haven't honored the half move you owed me yesterday," Ningchen said, unmoved. This woman's promises had no credibility at all. When he was in the academy, he could still believe a few words from the head academy. However, after leaving the academy, he had to think carefully before deciding whether to believe or not to believe any of her words. Seeing that Ningchen was indifferent, Hua Zhongdia rolled her eyes and leaned closer. She exhaled and said, "Ningchen, do you think senior sister is pretty? How about I become your wife?" "Don't get so close. My face is big, and I feel dizzy." Ningchen stretched out his hand and pushed away the beautiful face in front of him. He was still unmoved. "Ningchen, are you going to teach me or not?" Hua Zhongdia's patience finally ran out. Her slender arms tightly clasped the former's neck and threatened. "I'll teach you, but you have to promise me one thing." Ningchen struggled to break the former's arms and said, "What is it?" Hua Zhongdia's eyes were full of vigilance. She said, "Marry me? How afraid are you that you won't be able to get married?" Ningchen replied, and then his expression became serious. He said seriously, "My condition is very simple. When you arrive at the city without tears, please think twice before you do anything." Looking at the former's serious expression, Hua Zhongdia loosened her arms and said unhappily, I know. You're more long-winded than the academy head. Wulei. Ningchen glanced at the woman behind him and said, Since you are the daughter of the Red King, do you have any keepsake to prove your identity? Hong Wulei nodded and took out a short sword from her waist. She immediately cut her left arm. As blood gushed out, a ring embedded with a blood-red tear-shaped stone flew out and fell into her hand. Red King ring. Hua Zhongdia saw it, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. This ring was hidden here. No wonder this ring completely disappeared after the death of the Red King. Ningchen was just about to take a look at it when Hua Zhongdia stopped him. She reminded him, Be careful. The rings of the 4 kings are very extraordinary, especially the Red King ring. You don't have the special bloodline of the Red King clan. You may be counterattacked by the power of the ring. Ningchen heard this and looked a little surprised. He took the ring and carefully observed it. The ring lit up with a blood-red brilliance. The next moment, a strong counterforce came and in an instant swallowed up the incoming genuine qi. Ningchen narrowed his eyes and returned the ring to Wulei. The power within this ring was similar to karmic luck, but it was also different. Presumably, the Red King clan's bloodline had been added when it was forged. Ordinary people would find it difficult to control. Of the other 3 kings, who was the Red King's best friend when he was alive? Asked Ningchen. The Violet King, the Dark King, and Hong Wulei wrote down 2 names. Ningchen noted it down. So the Azure King's relationship with the Red King wasn't that good. However, it was impossible to judge a book by its cover. What their relationship wasn't a decisive clue as to the cause of the Red King's death. Ningchen rubbed his aching head. It had been a long time since he had thought about this kind of troublesome matter. He wasn't used to it. The 3 of them walked for half a day before finally arriving at Wulei City. The dilapidated ancient city was no longer as prosperous as it had been in the past. The commoners had either left or scattered. Over 10 years had passed, and only some women, children, and old people had remained. A city that had lost the protection of a king was too easy to invade. In an era where bandits ran rampant, it wasn't easy to stay alive. Ningchen walked through the city, looking at the lifeless city. His calm eyes didn't change at all. The 3 of them walked through the streets, heading straight for the ruins of the former royal palace. The majestic royal palace was now mostly in ruins, telling of how tragic the battle back then was. Although the Red King had been schemed against and was heavily injured, he was still so powerful that it was frightening. What's your plan? Asked Hua Zhongdia. There's no rush. Senior apprentice Sister Dai, let's learn the Rui art first. Ningchen condensed Yuan into a palm and pushed aside a huge boulder in front of him. He walked into a relatively intact palace and stopped for a moment. Wulei, I forgot to buy some brush and ink. Go take a look, said Ningchen. Hong Wulei nodded and didn't think too much about it. He turned and walked out of the palace. What is it? Asked Hua Zhongdia once Hong Wulei left. Just what was it that he had to send Hong Wulei away first? It's nothing. There are some things that we shouldn't let her know about. It'll be more effective. Ningchen told Hua Zhongdia his plan in detail. Hua Zhongdia was stunned. Her eyes flashed with a creepy smile from time to time. Neither of them was a good person. When it came to intelligence and calculation, one of them was famous in the Divine Prefecture for being evil. Who knew how many people had been killed by him? Junior apprentice brother, I also have a lot of enemies. If there's a chance, help me deal with them. Hua Zhongdia patted her cute junior apprentice brother's shoulder and smiled like a blooming flower. How could there be such a smart person in the world? He was too despicable, too shameless, too likable. Senior apprentice Sister Dai, this is a serious matter. Don't mess it up. Ningchen was very worried about the woman in front of him, so he reminded her again. Don't worry. Your senior apprentice sister is the most reliable. Hua Zhongdia patted her chest and replied, Who do you think is the bad guy among the 3 kings? Asked Hua Zhongdia excitedly. Ningchen had a headache and replied, How would I know? I can't predict the future. Senior apprentice sister, you'd better hurry up and practice the Rui method. Don't be recognized by others. It'll be a big joke. Even the academy won't be able to handle all your enemies together. Only the academy chief was kind enough to let this she-devil stay in the academy. If it were him, he would drive this woman away without hesitation, so as to avoid trouble if she was exposed one day. But then again, it seemed that his situation wasn't any better. There were too many people who wanted to chop him into pieces. Wasn't it a bit inappropriate for him to despise Butterfly and the flower so much? Not long after, Hong Wulei came back with a brush and ink. Ning Chun silently practiced the Rui method and sent Hua Zhongdia away. Then, he picked up the brush and wrote 3 more letters. "Wulei, give me the king ring," said Ning Chun. Hong Wulei nodded and handed over the king ring without any hesitation. Now, the young master was the only one who was willing to help her. If she didn't even trust the young master, how could she take revenge? From now on, the red origin king ring will be under my care. Also, as soon as he finished speaking, a palm imprinted on her heart. Hong Wulei was sent flying, covered in blood. She vomited a mouthful of blood, dyeing the ground in front of her red. Hong Wulei struggled to get up, but was unable to do so. She collapsed on the ground, her eyes full of regret.
Why?
If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too naive. In this world, no one is worthy of your trust. Even your benefactor is the same. Ning Chun walked forward and looked at the woman lying in a pool of blood. His indifferent gaze did not contain the slightest emotion.
Why?
There were no tears. It was the regret of having her hopes shattered. It was also the unwillingness of being betrayed by someone she trusted. The mute woman opened her mouth, but at this moment, she could not say a word. Thousands of words were now left in silence. Whether it was regret or unwillingness, they all disappeared into the dust along with the mouthful of blood. The tears in the eyes of the mute woman who had lost consciousness fell into the pool of blood. There were no tears, but there were tears. It was not the thousands of hardships when she was young, nor the thousands of hatred when she was defeated. However, when this palm fell, all her hopes and warmth were destroyed. Ning Chun was silent. He gently picked up Wulei's body and walked to Hua Zhongdia. He said calmly, "Now it's your turn." Chapter 450. At the back of the hall, Hua Zhongdia looked at the woman in Ning Chen's arms covered in blood. Although she was mentally prepared, she still couldn't help showing a complicated expression. After a short moment of absent-mindedness, Hua Zhongdia regained her composure. She smiled and said, "You're really ruthless. My palm just now destroyed 70% of her life force, but it's not like she can't be saved. With the 3 kings' abilities, we should be able to save her in one night. Leave her with the Violet King or the Dark King." If they don't save her, while speaking, Ning Chen's eyes were full of murderous intent. He said, "Before dawn, bring Wulei back and kill them all." "As you wish." Hua Zhongdia stood up. Her eyes were serious, and she answered calmly, "I'll go to King Qing. I'll leave this to you." After that, Ning Chen put down Hong Wulei and turned to leave. Looking at the back of the former, Hua Zhongdia sighed softly. The young man seemed to have a heart of steel, but sometimes he was so stubborn that it made people feel sorry for him. Everyone had a mask, including Ning Chen and the 3 kings. As the old saying goes, you may know a person's face, but not his heart. After more than 10 years, all the truth had been buried in time. It was very difficult to find it again. The 3 kings were not fools. They couldn't let the flaw exist for more than 10 years. It could be said that the death of the Red King was untraceable. In terms of wisdom, 10 Hong Wulei added together couldn't compare with 1 Ning Chen. Therefore, many things that Hong Wulei couldn't see, Ning Chen could see clearly. The truth of the past was not so important, and it was impossible to restore it completely. The important thing was what role the 3 kings played in the death of the Red King. After making a decision, the rest would be much easier. It was not easy. She was not good at it, and neither was the chief. But for Ning Chen, it didn't seem to be impossible. In the past few months in the academy, She and the chief had almost the same evaluation of this boy. He was overly calm and terrifyingly wise. This kind of character would only appear in the old monsters who had lived for countless years. Unexpectedly, it appeared in a young man today. There was no natural monster in the world. It was not necessarily a good thing to be indifferent to honor and disgrace. This only showed that what had happened to this boy was unimaginable. She and the headmaster did not ask because there was no need to. Just as Ningchen had said, once they had made their stand, the rest was not important. After Ningchen left, Butterfly in the flower closed her eyes and continued to cultivate the wish law. She felt sorry for Hong Wulei, but at the same time, she rejoiced for this girl. It was not easy to invite Ningchen, but since he was here, this trip would not be in vain. It was a cold night in Blue Frost City. In the palaces that were not very grand, kings dressed in blue were dealing with political affairs. In the middle of the palace, a king dressed in blue was calmly looking at the secret text in his hand, seriously annotating and dotting the ink. Prince Qing by Chengkong. It wasn't an extraordinary name. Among the four kings, he was the coldest and most rational one. Even his subordinates were as rational and calm as King Qing. They were like machines that handled the affairs of the imperial city. If the Red King's personality was as fiery as fire, then the Green King's personality was as cold as ice. They were the two extremes. Therefore, ever since they inherited the throne, they had never gotten along. Outside the imperial palace, Ningchen appeared. He walked forward step by step, not bothering to hide his tracks. In the palace, the king's officials immediately stood up. They did not look anxious, but they all pulled out their swords to block the path. In the next moment, the 13 king's officials gathered their strength and slashed down. A terrifying blue sword light tore through the air and slashed towards the newcomer. However, the Red King did not move at all. The protective sword intent in front of him turned into a shield that blocked the sword light. In the imperial palace, King Qing put down the secret text in his hand and stood up. He calmly said, "You are a guest. You can leave and continue with your work."
Yes.
The 13 king's officials accepted the order and returned to their positions to continue with their work. The two of them looked at each other. Ningchen looked at the young King Tier. At the same time, King Qing also looked at the young man in front of him. Although neither of them said a word, the rising air currents around them kept surging and colliding violently. "Why have you come here?" King Qing asked. "I want to ask for your advice," Ningchen replied. "My sword does not come out for matters outside of the imperial city," King Qing said calmly. "Does killing the Red King count as a matter of the imperial city?" Ningchen slowly asked. King Qing's eyes narrowed. Rays of light flashed through them. "I did not kill the Red King. The Verdant Emperor's sword cannot kill him. Rumor has it that the Azure King is righteous, and Azure King City is the most peaceful of the 4 cities. Azure King, do you think my sword has the power to break this peace?" Ningchen's killing intent surged out as he calmly asked. "Before that, my sword will kill all threats to the imperial city." As he spoke, King Qing reached out and grabbed his sword. He slowly pulled out 3 parts of the imperial sword. In an instant, a bone-piercing coldness spread out, making people feel cold all over. Ning Chan was unmoved. He took out the Red Origin King ring and said indifferently, "King Qing, are you familiar with this ring?" "The Red Origin King ring," said King Qing coldly. "I'm not interested in how the Red King died or who he died for, but I want to know how to control this king's ring. If you don't tell me, I'll kill everyone in Qing Shuang City. You should know that even if I can't leave Qing Shuang City safely today, I'll still be able to heavily injure it," said Ningchen indifferently. King Qing's eyes flickered with coldness. After a long time, he slowly said, "Fine, but I have a condition." "Speak," said Ningchen. "I want to know where the Red King's daughter is." "What I want," said Ningchen calmly. King Qing waved his hand, and the table behind him split apart. A jade slip flew out of a secret compartment and into Ning Chen's hand. Ning Chen glanced at it and then raised his head. Han Wulei is with the Violet King or the Dark King, but he only has half a breath left. King Qing's expression changed. Is he with the Violet King or the Dark King? It's hard to say. It depends on what my friend chooses, said Ningchen. You want us to kill each other? King Qing wasn't stupid. After thinking about it for a moment, he quickly reacted. Smart. Ning Chen's lips curled. He took a step forward, transforming into a ray of light that shot into the distance. King Qing, do you think the Violet King or the Dark King will be willing to waste their yuan qi to save her? Or do you think those two kings will fight over her? His final words echoed through the King Qing palace. King Qing's expression was as cold as ice. This person was truly sinister. Back then, the Red King's death had caused an irreparable rift between the three kings. Now, this move was definitely going to cause the three kings to shed all pretenses. What a good way to benefit the fishermen when the sandpiper and the clam fight. In the Redbud Royal City, a blue-robed figure flashed past. In a luxurious palace, a purple-robed woman sat quietly. The luxurious palace decorations were beautiful, reflecting the woman's exquisite and beautiful face. She was the only female king among the four kings of the world. Her extraordinary aura attracted the attention of others. The saber god had charged into the palace. With a single peach tree, he had forced back all obstructions. When the saber god displayed his martial arts, it was difficult to distinguish who he was. Blades and swords flew, and the palace guards couldn't block them. In the blink of an eye, the blue-robed woman had arrived within the palace. King Qing attacked, and the peach wood blocked her attack. With a loud explosion, the entire palace shook violently. Is this how King Qing greets his guests? Asked Hua Zhongdia indifferently. Breaking into the palace in the middle of the night, what are your intentions? Asked Emperor Zi, narrowing his eyes. Giving a gift. With that, Hua Zhongdia waved her left hand, and a letter flew out toward the violet-robed king. Seeing this, the Violet King condensed her yuan qi with her slender hands. Purple light surged as she caught the letter flying towards her. When he regained his composure, the blue-robed woman had already left. She disappeared into the night. King, there's an unconscious woman outside the palace. She should have been left behind by that person. The leader of the Imperial Guards appeared below the Imperial Highness and said respectfully, Bring her in. King Qing opened the letter and said calmly,
Yes.
As soon as he saw the ink on the letter, the Violet King's expression changed. He looked at the sleeping woman in front of him, and his heart began to pound like a storm. He couldn't control himself. He walked forward, step by step. He didn't know if he should be happy or sad. Wulei. King Qing reached out and touched the woman's face. He couldn't hide the sadness in his eyes. Boundless violet qi from his king ring entered the woman's body. Did you make the right choice? Outside the palace, a beautiful figure in blue stood in the void. She narrowed her eyes and said softly as she looked at Han Wulei, whose vitality was gradually recovering. Scheming, calculating, and judging people. It was really a headache. Only a monster like Ning Chen could do it so skillfully. She had to admit defeat in this aspect. She couldn't see any flaws in King Qing's plan. At the very least, King Qing had truly saved Han Wulei. His sadness didn't seem to be an act. Hua Zhongdia felt her head ache. She didn't want to think about it anymore. It was better to let Ning Chen worry about it. In the next moment, the blue figure in the void faded and melted into the night, disappearing without a trace. 2 hours later, a beam of light streaked across King Qing's palace. The letter was stabbed into the table. The person who had delivered the letter left without staying for even a moment. On the throne, King Qing opened his eyes. He had the temperament of a scholar. His qi was ordinary. It didn't match his title at all. He was one of the 2 kings that King Qing had a good relationship with when he was alive. Among the 4 kings, he was the most low-key one. His cultivation base was unfathomable. Wulei, are you still alive? After King of Darkness read the contents of the letter, he muttered softly and walked out of the palace. His dark robe fluttered in the wind. It was the first time in 10 years that the most mysterious king had left the palace. He walked out of the palace. In the royal palace of the tearless city, the butterfly and the flower appeared after finishing her task. Not long after, the void shook, and the red-robed figure gathered and returned as well. "Is everything done?" asked Ningchen.
Yes.
Hua Zhongdia nodded. She told him everything that had happened tonight, especially the reactions of the two kings. "Did you see anything? Is it King Qing or King Dark?" asked Hua Zhongdia. According to the three kings' attitudes and identities, King Qing, who had always been at odds with King Qing, was the most suspicious one. The other one was the mysterious King Dark. As for King Qing, according to what had happened tonight, he wasn't a suspect. Chapter 451. In the Divine Prefecture, 33 miles to the north of the Eternal Night Sect's old site, the white-robed Venerable Bodhi stood quietly, looking at the broken sword in the dust. Sadness flashed in his eyes. Suo Luo broke the sword, and Bodhi proved his Tao. He sacrificed his life for the common people without any regrets. The Divine Prefecture paid the most painful price for the heavenly sin tribulation. Countless souls were buried forever, and the living also suffered endless pain in the cycle of reincarnation. Knowing destiny and Xiazi, one had to bear the karma of killing the common people, and the other had to bear the endless demonic aura. Amitba. Venerable Bodhi pulled out the broken sword from the ground and was about to leave when a black-robed figure came from afar. The blood-red demonic mark on his forehead was unusually glaring, and his white hair fluttered in the wind. The former emperor who saved the world, the current demon fetus who brought disaster to the world, was surging with demonic aura. It was so terrifying that it made people tremble. Demon. Venerable Bodhi's face darkened. It wasn't that young man who was still on the verge of becoming a demon. The person in front of him was a real demon. The demon also sensed it and stopped, looking at the Buddha in front of him. There was no emotion in his cold eyes. 7 Buddhas, extradite to Thagata. In front of the demon, Venerable Bodhi focused. He spun the prayer beads in his hand, and one of the beads quickly transformed into Buddha words, blocking the demon's path. "Doing justice for the heavens?"
Ha!
The demon sneered, and demonic aura surged out of his body, blocking the golden Buddha light. Seeing that the demon was more difficult to deal with than the previous people, Venerable Bodhi waved the prayer beads, and hundreds of images appeared around him. He turned into a teacher, a blacksmith, and an old monk chanting scriptures. All of them were different, and they were all facing the demon together. Lippo Emperor Lippo. Chio 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 Di. Luo and ID. Nia Luo Emperor, Pailayu Emperor, Mahajia Emperor, Jinling Qian Emperor, Shapo. 7 Buddhas, Sanskrit power locked the demon, and sacred Sanskrit chants reverberated between heaven and earth, passing through the demon's body and reaching the deepest part of his consciousness. The demonic aura around the demon became even more terrifying. It was so thick that it almost condensed, blocking the Sanskrit chants from all directions. The demon's ability was shocking. "He can't be converted?" Subhuti sighed softly. There was no turning back for this devil. The Buddha made up his mind and waved the prayer beads in his hand, dispersing the Sanskrit chants. Immediately, a golden Buddha world descended. The Buddha moved to kill, no longer showing any mercy. Demon's sword. The demonic cultivator clenched his right hand, and the demonic sword was unsheathed. When the demonic sword entered his hand, an even more terrifying demonic might spread out, crashing into the surrounding golden Buddha world. At this moment, the broken Sua Luo sword hummed softly. The sword that had once suppressed a demonic cultivator sensed the aura of the demonic cultivator in front of it and hummed continuously. A strange look flashed across Subhuti's eyes. The spirit of Suo Luo was actually pleading for mercy for the demon. Could it be that this devil was also one of the several powerhouses from the Divine Prefecture who participated in the Battle of Blasphemy during the Divine Tribulation that destroyed the world 10 years ago? At this point, Venerable Subhuti hesitated. If that was really the case, then this demon had saved the world, and the world owed him a favor. But, aren't you going to make a move? I'm sure we'll meet again. As the demon passed by, his eyes remained cold as he walked west step by step. In the tearless city, in the moonless night, in the ruins of the royal palace, Ningchen was lost in thought for a long time. The three kings' performances were all different. Based on their performances, it was indeed as Butterfly and the Flower had said. King Qing was the biggest suspect. However, before Hong Wulei woke up, this was just a guess. Let's go to the Redbud Palace, Ningchen said after thinking for a while. Butterfly and the Flower nodded. The show was about to begin, and she couldn't wait. The two walked together and left again after a few breaths. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. The battle between the three kings was about to begin. The three kings had the biggest motive for King Red's death. None of them could escape suspicion. At the very least, before the final result was out, the three kings couldn't be trusted. In the Redbud Palace, a king in a dark gray robe walked over step by step. His scholarly face didn't show any killing intent. If it weren't for the king's ring on his hand, it would be hard to believe that this seemingly weak scholar was the most mysterious and feared of the three kings. In the three-flower palace, the Purple King, who had just used the power of the king's ring to stabilize Hong Wulei's vitality, looked exhausted. He reached out and touched Hong Wulei's forehead lovingly. Poor child. Soon, a cold wind blew, and a king's pressure descended. The guards couldn't block it, and they couldn't even touch the dark gray king's clothes. The Dark King's appearance caused the entire three-flower palace's aura to freeze. It was like a quagmire, making it hard for people to breathe. Hand over Hong Wulei, said the Dark King calmly. I can't do that, said the Purple King. Then I'll have to offend you. The Dark King's figure flickered, and a palm descended. A dark aura streaked through the air, and the space around it couldn't bear the pressure, and suddenly split apart. Seeing this, the Purple King condensed her yuan qi in her hands. Purple light rose from her body as she met the attack with her palm. With a loud bang, the Purple King was forced back half a step. His blood qi roiled violently. He had used his true yuan to maintain Hong Wulei's vitality, so his cultivation technique was no longer at its peak. In front of the Dark King, he showed signs of being defeated in just one exchange. However, how could the dignity of a king be so easily blasphemed? The Purple King waved his hand, activating the power of the king's ring. His vast true yuan transformed into a roaring violet flood dragon that coiled around him. You're not the only one with a king's ring. The Dark King's eyes flashed, and his vast yuan condensed into the king's ring on his right hand. In an instant, a tiger's roar shook the heavens. The three-flower palace immediately began to shake violently. The palace's protective formation flickered, and then disappeared. The palace's 4 stone pillars all collapsed, and in the blink of an eye, they had all turned to dust. The Purple King was forced back several steps by the shockwaves. Her lips were red, and her gentle eyes were ice-cold. Dark King, you've gone too far. The Violet King wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. His delicate hand moved, and a divine halberd with purple qi rose from the ground. In a flash, the king's ring was taken off and inserted into the groove on the halberd. A terrifying oppressive force spread out. A shocking king's implement had appeared for the first time in the world. The Dark King's expression became grave when he saw the Purple King item appear. A king item that could suppress karmic luck was the foundation of a dynasty. It wouldn't be easy for him to take it away from the red tearless king item. In the next instant, the two kings exchanged blows once more. The Purple King's power suddenly increased with the addition of the king's ring and king item. On the other hand, although the Dark King was in his peak state, he couldn't block the king item's power with his bare hands. He couldn't gain the upper hand for the time being. Just as the two sides were fiercely fighting, a ray of azure light streaked across the distance. An azure-robed king with a solemn expression charged into the three-flower palace. Dark King, Purple King, stop. The Azure King's sword blocked the divine halberd, and his palm blocked its power. By Chunkong, you came at the wrong time. said the Dark King indifferently. Taking advantage of someone's perilous state isn't the conduct of a gentleman. Dark King, you're close to the Red King, so you should know what he hates the most, said the Azure King. The Red King? He's been dead for more than 10 years. His bones probably can't even be found. What does his hatred have to do with me? Said the Dark King coldly. Hearing that, the Purple King's eyes flashed with unconcealable killing intent. He said, Dark King, watch your mouth. Today, I won't be able to save you, but next time, you won't be so lucky. After saying that, the Dark King turned around and walked out of the palace. The Azure King observed the two kings' expressions and then looked at the Purple King. He said seriously, Purple King, be careful. The Dark King's strength might not be limited to this.
Thank you for helping me.
I'll be careful, said the Purple King. The Azure King didn't say anything else. He sheathed his sword and left. Among the two figures floating in the sky above the palace, Hua Zhongdia, who had watched the three kings show her entire life, found it hard to tell if she was real or fake. The Azure King seems a bit hypocritical. The Purple King is the most honest and doesn't hide his emotions. As for the Dark King, he's unfathomable. It's hard to say, said Hua Zhongdia. Now, if I ask you to pick a murderer, who will you pick? Asked Ning Chen. The Dark King, Hua Zhongdia thought for a while and said. Ning Chen nodded and didn't say anything else. Not long ago, the Azure King was the most suspicious. Now it was the Dark King. The three kings were all shrewd. The contents of the letters he sent to the three kings were all different. The Azure King didn't tell the other two kings about his existence. It could be seen that after the Red King's death, the three kings no longer trusted each other. According to tonight's judgment, the Red King's death wasn't set up by the three kings. It was just one of them. In fact, the possibility of the Azure King being the murderer was not high. As Bai Chenkong said, he couldn't kill the Red King. The reason was simple. The Red King and the Azure King had been at odds for a long time. They were both on guard against each other. It would be difficult for the Azure King to plot against the Red King without letting others know. As for the Purple King and the Dark King, one was the Red King's confidant, and the other was the Red King's trusted friend. They had the best chance to kill the Red King. The two of them reminded him of one person. Duke Xiu, one of the three dukes of the great Xia dynasty, was the most patient person he had ever seen. After 40 years of ups and downs, he only showed his flaw at the last move. Fan Lingyue was the best in the world in terms of layout and overt schemes. Duke Xiu didn't lose to anyone in terms of scheming. However, scheming couldn't be done in the end. The death of Duke Xiu was the best example. Not long ago, what he said to the Chief Academy was actually not a joke. Out of the 10 talents in the world, Fan Lingyue had 6. The rest of the people had 4. He, Duke Xiu, and the other 3 kings were among the rest. Therefore, they weren't much better than the others. At least, compared to Fan Lingyue, he could only be regarded as a martial artist who didn't know how to scheme. But because of this, no matter how smart and patient the 3 kings were, they couldn't be flawless. As long as they were a fox, they would show their tail, no matter how old they were. Fortunately, his opponent was no longer Fan Lingyue. Unfortunately, his opponent would no longer be Fan Lingyue. Do you still want to watch the show? I'm leaving for 2 days. Ning Chen glanced at the girl beside him and said. Hua Zhongdia thought for a while and said, No, this little girl won't wake up for the time being. I'll come back in a few days. Okay, then let's go together. Ning Chen nodded and said. Hua Zhongdia took one last look at the palace below and then left with the former. Chapter 452. On the 10th day, the news about the demonic Will Ocean spread rapidly in the southwest region of the central continent. Originally, only the most powerful sects in the world knew about this forbidden area, but now, everyone knew about it. There were immortals in the human world. This news undoubtedly shocked all the cultivators in the world. There were only 2 goals for cultivation: fame and fortune and immortality. Fame and fortune were easy to obtain, but immortality was hard to obtain. Xiantian took 300 years, supremacy took 800 years. No matter how strong a person was, no matter how talented they were, they couldn't escape the cleansing of time. 800 years was the limit. Demonic Will Ocean, Immortal Palace. In the Mizar dynasty, the Yuan Emperor's eyes flashed coldly. Although he didn't know who spread this news, there was no doubt that the central continent, which had been peaceful for so many years, would raise a huge wave. In the academy, in the pavilion in the middle of the lake, the academy head, who was brewing tea, heard the report of the young man in white. Her delicate hand slightly trembled, but she immediately calmed down and sent him away. Ning Chen, what are you doing? The academy head looked into the distance and whispered softly. In the ruins of the palace in Tearless City, Hua Zhongdia looked at the young man beside her. The corner of her mouth curved into a beautiful arc. She smiled and said, "Junior brother, you really are a dangerous person. Even your senior sister is a bit scared." Ning Chen smiled and said, "Senior sister Dai, I'll feel ashamed if you say that. I've met countless people in my life, but only you have the best temper. Do you know why?" "Because I'm beautiful." Hua Zhongdia smiled like a butterfly. It was very dazzling and also very frightening.
Ah.
Ning Chen smiled and said, "Senior sister is very beautiful, but the biggest reason is that you never deliberately hide your fickleness. In addition, you don't know how to write the 4 words propriety, justice, integrity, and shame." Hua Zhongdia narrowed her eyes. She didn't take those words as sarcasm because Ning Chen was right. She was never a decent woman. She rarely personally killed people, but the number of people who wanted her dead was uncountable. "Senior sister really likes you more and more. How about we make do?" Hua Zhongdia walked forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. Her eyes were blurred. "I have someone I like. Senior sister, you appeared too late." Ning Chen smiled and shook off the she-devil's arm. He didn't care and didn't put on an act. He rejected her without hesitation. "I can be a concubine. If the first and second concubines can't, isn't there still the third concubine?" Butterfly and the flower once again approached him, exhaling an orchid scent. "Then senior apprentice sister will have to wait for a long time." Furthermore, senior apprentice sister should know that fickle men will first judge a woman's value, not her feelings, no matter how beautiful she is. Ning Chen looked to the east and lightly smiled. "It doesn't matter." Hua Zhongdia leaned forward and kissed him on the cheek. She smiled and said, "Don't you still have time? You are still too young. I still need to take care of you for a few more days. However, you have to grow up quickly. A woman's patience is very limited. I'm afraid that I won't be able to control myself." Senior martial sister, the demonic tribulation is very difficult. "Be careful," Ning Chen said seriously, ignoring the former's crazy words. Of all the people he knew, Butterfly and the Flower was the first person who wanted to become a chosen. However, the demonic tribulation, the emotional tribulation, and the tribulation of all living beings were the 3 most terrifying tribulations on the path to becoming a chosen. The demonic tribulation and the emotional tribulation were even more terrifying. He wasn't lying. Although he had only known Butterfly and the Flower for a few short months, their tempers were the best. He didn't want this she-devil to be taken away by the heavens. There were too many good men and good women in this world. He had to give bad men and bad women a way to survive. "Don't worry. I'll quickly eat you before I become a chosen. Otherwise, if I fail, wouldn't it be regretful?" Butterfly and the Flower loosened her arms and smiled even more brilliantly. Ning Chen didn't say anything more. He knew this she-devil liked to sing, and she liked acting even more. Some words were best left unsaid. Butterfly and the Flower didn't continue to be so overbearing. She changed the topic. "What about that little girl? She probably hates you to death right now. The Violet King treats her pretty well. I should go pay him a visit," said Ning Chen calmly. "I'll go as well." Butterfly and the Flower's eyes began to shine. She returned to her usual appearance of wanting to see the world burn. "You're only allowed to listen. You're not allowed to speak carelessly. You're also not allowed to casually attack." Ning Chen didn't refuse and reminded her. Senior apprentice sister is the most obedient. Butterfly in the Flower smiled cutely and replied. Ning Chen smiled indifferently. It would be strange if he believed her. However, as long as this she-devil's identity wasn't exposed, everything else was fine. As for Han Wulei, he wasn't worried at all. The academy head and the Red King were old friends. Han Wulei wasn't an ungrateful person. She wouldn't reveal Butterfly in the Flower's identity and cause trouble for the academy. Heartless people hurt others, but heartless people hurt themselves. Han Wulei was kind-hearted. Even though she had been hit by his palm, she wouldn't vent her anger on the academy. In addition, Han Wulei could no longer trust the three kings without reservation. Do you regret it?
Hua Zhongdia suddenly said.
Humans were not made of iron or stone. How could they be heartless? A person's unreserved trust was the heaviest burden. She did not believe that Ning Chen's heart was not softened at all when he made that palm strike. I don't regret it. Ning Chen sighed. He didn't regret it, but he felt heartache. Even someone as fickle as him couldn't bear to see the look in that girl's eyes before she fainted. How ironic. There was no greater sorrow than a dead heart. Perhaps his palm had been too ruthless. However, if he had to do it again, he would still make the same choice. If you feel guilty, then quickly find the culprit who schemed against the Red King, said Butterfly in the Flower softly. Very soon, Ning Chen nodded. He didn't have time to waste on the three kings. If nothing unexpected happened, there would soon be countless experts heading to the demonic Wheel Sea. If there really were immortals in this world, would they be able to tolerate these intruders? Or perhaps a mortal would go against the immortals and break into the immortal palace, prying into the secrets of heaven that had been hidden for tens of thousands of years. In the Redbud Palace, two people walked over. Butterfly in the Flower's appearance had changed. She had restrained her aura and looked delicate and gentle, like a harmless little sister. In front of the palace, the Imperial Guard leader's expression immediately became grave when he saw the two of them. Please inform them that the person who delivered the letter has come tonight, said Ning Chen indifferently. In front of the palace gate, when the leader of the guards heard this, he didn't say anything and immediately sent someone to report. Not long after, the Imperial Guard who had gone to inform them returned. He respectfully bowed and said, "The two of you, my king invites you in." "Many thanks," Ning Chen said, and walked forward with Hua Zhongdia. After the two of them left, the Imperial Guard leader's stiff body slowly came down. The pressure that the red-clothed young man gave off was really frightening. His aggressive aura was like a ferocious beast that wanted to devour people alive. In the Three-Flower Palace, the Violet King sat on his throne. The two of them walked in and politely bowed to the beautiful woman in front of him. "Honored guests, please forgive me for not going out to meet you." The Violet King stood up and walked down his throne with a smile. "You're too courteous. Wulei was injured by someone, and I was unable to save him. I could only send him to the Violet King. Speaking of which, I have to thank the Violet King for your help," said Ning Chen. "Your Excellency, do you know who injured him?" asked Zi Wang, narrowing his eyes. "I don't know." Ning Chen shook his head. "The person who attacked was too fast. I didn't have time to see his face." "That's a pity," said the Violet King regretfully. "How is Wulei's injury? Can you come out and see me?" asked Ning Chen seriously. The Violet King thought for a moment and didn't refuse. He signaled for a palace made to bring Han Wulei over. Wulei woke up and didn't eat or drink. She also didn't speak. It seemed she suffered a huge blow. The Violet King's eyes were filled with pity. "Wulei asked me to help her investigate the truth behind the Red King's death. But I never thought that a moment of carelessness would cause Wulei to be plotted against," said Ning Chen guiltily. Hearing him mention the Red King, the Violet King's eyes dimmed. He sighed and didn't say anything. To the side, Butterfly and the Flower Palace followed their agreement and didn't say anything. She just smiled as she listened to the man's lies. Ever since she was young, she knew that men's words couldn't be trusted. It was just like a woman's promise. Whoever believed it was a fool. The atmosphere in the palace was a bit heavy. At this moment, the palace maid returned and respectfully bowed. "I've brought Princess Wulei." As he spoke, a woman in dark red clothes walked out from the back of the palace. Her delicate face was still a little pale, and she looked very pitiful and weak. "Wulei, the prince is here to take you back." Ning Chen revealed a wisp of an amiable smile when he saw the person that had arrived. Bang! Hearing this familiar voice, Han Wulei shifted her gaze and subconsciously stepped back, knocking down the candlestick next to her. Panic and fear flashed across her pale face, and her delicate body kept shivering. Seeing this, the Purple King's eyes flashed. He stepped in front of Han Wulei and looked at the young man in front of him. He said slowly, "You should be able to see that Wulei is still very weak. Why don't you stay and rest for a few more days?"
What if I say no?
Ning Chen's smile became even warmer. The Violet King's expression turned cold. "Then let's see if you have the ability to take Wulei away."
Ha!
Ning Chen chuckled. He glanced at Han Wulei and softly said, "Wulei, recuperate well. The prince will come for you again." Ning Chen didn't say anything else. He turned and walked out of the palace.
How boring.
Hua Zhongdia sighed regretfully. In the next moment, her eyes flashed coldly. Her figure rushed out, grabbing at Han Wulei. The Violet King's expression sank. He instantly blocked in front of her and raised his palm. With a bang, the stone floor shattered. The Violet King took a step back, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. The injured king had lost. "Senior sister, let's go." Ning Chen looked back and calmly said, Hua Zhongdia nodded and chuckled. She turned and followed. "Violet King, I'll come again in a few days. Please take care of Wulei's injuries." As they spoke, the two figures gradually disappeared. In front of the fallen candle stand, Han Wulei's trembling body stopped. Tears lingered in her eyes, but this time, she held them back. The Violet King turned around and looked at the former. He sighed softly and said, "It's fine. With Aunt Lian here, no one can hurt you anymore." Chapter 453. The Devil Will See, War Chariots, and Beast Roars shook the heavens. The large sects had gathered, and one grand exalted after another appeared. Some of them were old monsters from hundreds of years ago who had half their bodies buried in the earth. Their lifespans had almost dried up, and their great medicines and heavenly pills were useless. They could only rely on the legendary immortals. The aura of king items surged. The Peak Grand Exalted had brought their sect guarding treasures. They wanted to use this king item to open the immortal palace and open a path to immortality. In the distance, a human sovereign opened his eyes and looked over, watching the various sects fight. At the same time, the void shook and two figures appeared. One was in red, one was in blue. They were at the peak of the sword, a god among sabers. They were calmly waiting for the various sects to attack the forbidden land of the human world. "You're willing to take the bait. Should I praise you for being smart, or should I call you treacherous?" Hua Zhongdia smiled. "They want immortality, and I want an answer. We both take what we need," said Ning Chen calmly. "So, what if you know the answer? Even if a power that surpasses the human world exists, how can a human control it?" Hua Zhongdia's expression became serious. Ning Chen was silent. After a moment, he softly said, "The power of the human world cannot save her. If there really is no power above the human world, then there is no path ahead of me." Hua Zhongdia sighed. A Peak Grand Exalted sword expert who had shocked the entire Southern Tomb had become powerless because of a woman. So, what if he was unrivaled in the world? He could win the world, but he couldn't win against her. "Junior apprentice brother, where are you from?" Hua Zhongdia turned around, asking this question for the first time. She hadn't asked before because there was no need, but now she really wanted to know. "Senior apprentice sister, do you want to hear?" Ning Chen was silent for a moment before asking.
Yes.
Hua Zhongdia nodded seriously. "I come from the Grand Xia dynasty of the Eastern Divine Prefecture," said Ning Chen slowly.
Hua Zhongdia was startled.
A moment later, Her expression changed, and she slowly said, Grand Xia, knowledge Marquis. Ning Chun was silent. He didn't admit or deny it. He hadn't heard this name in so many years that he had almost forgotten it. Seeing his expression, Hua Zhongdia's eyes flashed. She really hadn't expected the legendary martial Marquis to have been by her side this entire time. After the divine tribulation, the two supreme beings of West Earth took action to pull back the eastern region. However, because of the terrifying deterrence of the Netherworld King, most people deliberately avoided mentioning the eastern region. However, a few names still spread. Among them, the name of the great Xia Zhiming Marquis left the deepest impression. According to legend, he was one of the most important figures in the War of Blasphemy, and was also one of the few top experts who survived. The leader of the Divine Land, the great savior of mankind. I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I apologize to you. Butterfly in the Flower bowed and said pitifully, No need for formalities. Ningchen acted as if he didn't hear the teasing tone in the she-devil's voice and played along. You're not as strong as the legends say. Hua Zhongdia smiled and stood up. Yes. Ningchen nodded nonchalantly. It was easy to invite the devil in, but difficult to send it away. How could it be possible without paying a price? The fact that he was still alive was already the most extravagant thing. Therefore, he was very grateful to Changyu, very grateful, even if his main body had to pay the price of being trapped for dozens of years, or even hundreds of years. Today's words are a little secret between the two of us. In the future, don't tell anyone else, including the academy head. Butterfly in the Flower smiled sweetly. Her smile was so beautiful that it dazzled people. Understood? Ning Chen said softly. Don't worry. When I become the sovereign, in this world, who dares to bully you, I'll kill them. Butterfly in the Flower smiled seriously. Okay. A smile appeared on Ning Chen's face as he replied. Although he was forced to call her senior sister at first as he called her that, it became smooth. In the past, he didn't want to, but now he was willing. Just as Butterfly in the Flower said, it was not easy for a cruel and unscrupulous man and woman to meet each other. Butterfly in the Flower was not a normal person, but he was also not someone easy to deal with. He did not belittle himself, nor did he have anything to be proud of. He lived on while at death's door, and then did something that would not make him regret for the rest of his life. Until he could no longer go on. He missed Man. He couldn't leave. Why didn't that girl come to find him? Ning Chen looked to the west. It seemed that it had been a long, long time since he had seen her. And Senior, was he still as cold and callous as before? Senior sister, if there's a chance, I'll introduce you to a genius saber user, said Ning Chen softly. How genius is she? Butterfly in the Flower didn't believe him. I can't say that she's a genius saber user. She's a genius martial artist. A true genius might not be someone who will be able to surpass her in the future, but there's definitely no one before her. Her spirit is clear, and she can understand everything with just a hint. It's just that she doesn't like cultivating and is a bit slow. But senior sister, you'll like her. Ning Chen smiled warmly. What does she have to do with you? Asked Butterfly in the Flower. A princess who doesn't look like a princess once said she wanted to marry me, but I refused. Ning Chen's smile became even more brilliant. Cruel and unscrupulous. Butterfly in the Flower didn't conceal her ridicule. She really is cruel and unscrupulous. Ning Chen admitted it very straightforwardly, just as straightforwardly as when he had refused to marry her. Their inappropriate conversation was interrupted by a heaven-shaking explosion. The grand elders of the various sects were charging into the Devil Will See. As soon as their war chariots entered, they saw black light surging from the ground. Strands of terrifying aura filled with deathly stillness that made them shiver. Amidst the terrifying aura, the 9 heavens changed, and dark clouds covered the sun. On the ground, coffins rose up and opened. In the next moment, corpse gods in ancient robes walked out. The powerful death chi caused the atmosphere to become suffocating. They had been ambitious and ruthless when they were alive, but now they were dead. They had been buried for who knew how many years. One of them soared into the air and smashed apart a war chariot with a single fist. Blood and bones filled the air. The grand elders of the various sects were shocked, but they quickly came back to their senses. They had seen their entire lives, and in the end, they had gambled their lives. How could they be so easily scared off? A king item flickered with light. It was unknown which sect had brought a Buddhist holy item. It was specialized in restraining dark karma, and the corpse gods that had attacked were sent flying. The great battle was intense. War chariots were smashed down one after another. However, the corpse gods that were protecting them also paid a similar price, suffering great losses. The grand elders of the great sects protected by king items possessed great fighting strength. For the sake of seeing immortal palace and fighting for long life, they didn't hold back at all. Corpse gods fell from the horizon one after another. Only, the corpse gods were sturdy like metal and stone, undying bodies. After falling, they would quickly stand back up again. While they were in a deadlock, the void surged. A half-supreme expert with half his body in the yellow earth walked out. He wore white clothes, and even though he didn't have much lifespan left, he didn't look old. With the long life sword in hand, he hacked out 1,000 zhong path. Alcade King. Someone recognized the male who took action, crying out in alarm. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed.
He had also heard of this person.
He was the Alcade Imperial Court's previous king who should have passed away 100 years ago, yet he forcefully held on until this era. He was a legendary figure, his sword cultivation already reaching the peak, unmatched in this world. It was rumored that the Alcade King had long had the strength to become a supreme being. Only, in the final tribulation of love, he turned around and left, voluntarily giving up on his supreme being position. No one knew why, but this type of person definitely wouldn't last after long life. It was because it was once within reach. A generation's heavenly talent. Hua Zhongdia, who rarely praised others, also opened her mouth, slowly praising. There was a type of person in this world that not even human supreme beings were willing to rashly provoke. This was precisely the Alcade King before her eyes. Now, there was still her. Hua Zhongdia never underestimated herself.
There was no need to.
Moreover, there was no lack of human supreme beings among those who wanted to get rid of her. Unfortunately, she was still alive and well. Demonic will see. Alcade King took action, corpse gods collapsing one after another. The brilliance under the sword couldn't be stopped by deities. The sword on sword that should have disappeared 100 years ago appeared again today, still stunning and shocking the world. Observing the sword, admiring the sword, admiring the sword, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. Seeing the sword on sword again today, it was worth it. Hua Zhongdia gave the male beside her a look, not saying anything. Soon after, she continued to watch the battle ahead. She didn't understand the sword, but she understood that the sword on sword was also a sword on sword. Although the youth beside her was still lacking in cultivation, his attainments in the sword were already so high that countless people couldn't compare to him. Such a monstrous genius at such a young age. How could he possibly let others live? Thinking about this, Hua Zhongdia suddenly laughed. It was inexplicable, like a madwoman. However, Hua Zhongdia was very beautiful, so even if she was a madwoman, she was still pleasing to the eye. What are you laughing about? Ning Chen didn't understand. Looking at the demoness who was laughing like a blooming flower, he asked, "You can't beat me." Hua Zhongdia turned her head, giving him an even more brilliant smile. Seeing her smile, Ning Chen also laughed softly. "So, what if I can't beat you? Will senior sister attack me?" "When I'm singing, yes. Normally, no," said Hua Zhongdia honestly. "Then if you can't beat me, then so be it." Ning Chen smiled and shifted his gaze, continuing to watch the battle in the distance. The devil we'll see, the longevity sword, opened the path of life. The white-robed Alcade King looked like an immortal that had descended into the world. His sword was otherworldly, peerlessly elegant. The devil we'll see buried life, the corpse god's end, the clouds parted, the sun appeared, and the traces of the danger zone appeared. The huge dragon vein had already died, and everything within 100 miles became a land of death. Not a single blade of grass grew. It had become the most terrifying place to bury dragons. A war chariot didn't stop. It had only gone 10 meters when a grand elder whose lifespan had already withered up died. He didn't even have the chance to react before falling out of the chariot. That shocking scene shocked everyone. The grand elder's expressions all became unsightly. Another person was unwilling to admit defeat. Using a king item to protect himself, he drove the war chariot into the danger zone. However, the drained dragon vein had become the bane of king items. The king item's karmic luck was instantly devoured by the dragon vein. The grand elder on the war chariot rapidly aged. He wanted to rush back, but it was already too late. The immortal palace had yet to appear. There was no path to the danger zone. In front of longevity, it was as far as the horizon. Ji Yaoguang, do you really want to go in? A voice rang out from the distance. A powerful aura caused even heaven and earth to tremble. A human sovereign had interfered in the situation of the Forbidden Zone. Yes. The Alcade King didn't explain anything. He only calmly nodded. His expression was as carefree as when he had given up the position of sovereign without the slightest hesitation. The human sovereign sighed and didn't try to persuade him any further. Separated by who knew how many territories, he sent the white-robed Alcade King off with a palm of praise. Chapter 454. In the end, Alcade King still stepped into the impasse. His sword intent rose endlessly, splitting the 9 heavens and severing the mortal world. The most shocking sword attack shocked the entire central region. The human sovereign used all his strength to help Alcade King resist the death chi of the dragon burial impasse. In front of everyone's eyes, the white robe gradually disappeared. The Taishang of various sects watched the legend from 100 years ago enter the impasse, but they could only shake their heads helplessly and retreat temporarily. They didn't have the help of the human sovereign, and they didn't have the strength of Alcade King. Today, they were doomed to fail. As the afterglow of the setting sun shone down, the chariots left one after another. They were waiting for the day when they were ready to join hands and enter the Forbidden Land. Immortality is useless. Immortality is foolish. Looking at the scattered corpses in front of the impasse, Hua Zhongdia said lightly. Only the two of them could hear it. Ning Chun was silent. He didn't say anything. Immortality was indeed useless. However, her life hadn't started yet. How could she just sleep in a coffin? He still had many things to ask her. For example, why did she always wear a red wedding dress? Why did she always wear a red veil? She was obviously very beautiful, prettier than all the women in the world. Hua Zhongdia couldn't stand someone's calm appearance. She walked forward and forced a smile on his face. She said, "See, I told you that you're not a good person. Just one piece of news from you has harmed so many seniors of the great sections." Ning Chen struggled to get rid of the demoness. He thought for a while and forced a smile. He said, "Let's go back. The problem with Wulei hasn't been solved yet." "Oh, I thought you only cared about harming people and forgot about that little girl." Hua Zhongdia teased. "I can't forget," Ning Chen said in a soft but unquestionable voice. As for the demonic Will Ocean, since the world knew about it, he believed that from now on more people would come. Not everyone could resist the fear of death and the temptation of immortality. These great sects with thousands of years of history had to have some ability. He would quietly observe and wait for the day when they broke through the immortal palace. In the Redbud Palace, Han Wulei sat on the couch with her hands hugging her knees. Her eyes were dull. She didn't speak, didn't even move. Ziwang walked over and looked at the figure on the bed. She sighed softly, and a gentle expression appeared on her beautiful face. She said, "Wulei, are you feeling better?" Han Wulei raised his head and then lowered it again. From the beginning to the end, there was no change in his expression. The Purple King sighed. This silly girl's personality was almost exactly the same as her mother's. She was so stubborn that it made one's heart ache. Just what happened? Tell me. Aunt Lien will support you. The Violet Prince sat on the bed, gently stroking his hair. She could see that Wu Lei was very afraid of the young man who came to visit that day. That kind of fear couldn't be faked. At the same time, in the palace of King of Darkness, two figures sat facing each other, drinking wine and chatting with each other. Thank you for the letter, the King of Darkness said calmly. You're too polite. However, I'm a little surprised that the Dark King couldn't bring Hong Wulei back. Ningchen picked up his wine cup and took a sip. Ziwang is stronger than I expected. Furthermore, there's an endless supply of karmic luck in the palace. It's not difficult to defeat her, but it's also not easy, said the King of Darkness honestly. A strange light flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. He put down his wine cup and looked at the scholarly king. King of Darkness, who do you think is behind the Red King's death? Zi Wang or Qing Wang, said the King of Darkness. Ha! Ning Chen smiled. What a clever answer. Of the current world's 3 kings, excluding himself, there were only 2 left. King of Darkness, what do you think of the Red King? Asked Ning Chen casually. He's arrogant and courageous. However, he's too arrogant and trusts others too much. In short, he's a boorish fellow, said the King of Darkness. His evaluation doesn't seem high. Rumor has it that the King of Darkness is the Red King's best friend. That's a surprising answer, said Ning Chen. That boorish fellow was the one who said the word friend. I've never acknowledged it, said the King of Darkness indifferently. In that case, the King of Darkness might be the one who joined forces with Bai Luo Miesheng to kill the Red King, said Ning Chen. If I wanted to kill him, why would I need to join forces with others? Said the King of Darkness coldly. King of Darkness, you're really confident, said Ning Chen. The King of Darkness didn't want to talk about this anymore. He drank his wine and calmly said, since we've finished chatting, shouldn't you tell me why you're here? Ning Chen smiled. I've come to make a deal with the King of Darkness. What deal? Asked the King of Darkness. I'll help the King of Darkness deal with either Qing Wang or Zi Wang. Once the culprit is killed, the King's ring will be mine, said Ning Chen as he refilled their cups. The King of Darkness narrowed his eyes. How do you know who the culprit is? Whoever has the Red Origin King's ring is the culprit, said Ning Chen indifferently. And if I don't agree? Asked the King of Darkness coldly. Ning Chen didn't care. He slowly said, if the King of Darkness doesn't agree, then I'll go find Qing Wang or Zi Wang and repeat what I said today. It doesn't matter to me who the culprit is. My goal is only the King's ring. So if I'm unlucky and choose the culprit as my ally, then I'm really sorry. The King of Darkness's eyes became even colder. After a long time, the coldness disappeared. He said, deal. I wish you a pleasant cooperation. I'll take my leave first. See you in front of the Qing Wang Palace tonight. Ning Chen drank his wine in one gulp and stood up with a smile. The King of Darkness nodded calmly. Outside the palace, Hua Zhongdia was waiting. When she saw Ning Chen walk out, she softly asked, what do you think? I'll act tonight, said Ning Chen. Didn't you say that Qing Wang was the least suspicious? Why did you attack him first? Asked Hua Zhongdia. Qing Wang's existence is the key to easing the tension between the 3 kings. If something happens to Qing Wang, the King of Darkness and Zi Wang's conflict will become even more obvious. That's why Wu Lei's Red Yuan King ring is more valuable, said Ning Chen. The 3 kings were now at odds with each other on the surface, and did not trust each other. It was precisely because of this that his 3 letters were able to play the greatest role. Tonight, the triangular balance was broken, and many things would slowly surface. That girl will be fine, right? Asked Hua Zhongdia worriedly. She won't. Right now, she's the safest. At least, before the Red Yuan King ring appears, neither the Zi Wang nor the King of Darkness will let anything happen to her, said Ning Chen. Night fell, and the moon was in the middle of the sky. A cold wind blew against the withered trees. In front of the Azure King Palace, the king in dark gray robes waited quietly. Not long after, a beautiful figure in blue robes appeared. Step by step, she walked over. It's you? The King of Darkness recognized her. This was the woman who had delivered the letter that day. Her strength was unfathomable. Even he couldn't see through her. "Let's go," said Hua Zhongdia indifferently.
Yes.
The King of Darkness nodded. He didn't ask any more questions. With this woman cooperating with him, it was enough. Within the Qinglong Palace, the king's subordinates all went about their duties as usual. Within the palace, the azure-robed young king was also meticulously handling state affairs. All of a sudden, a cold wind gusted as killing intent gushed forth. Two silhouettes walked out from the void, exuding a powerful aura that caused the countenances of the ministers present to turn heavy. In front of the table, the Qinglong's hand paused. He put down his brush and stood up. Looking at the subordinates, he calmly said, "You can all leave, my king." The expressions of the 13 ministers changed as they exclaimed anxiously,
Leave.
His green eyes turned cold as he shouted. They couldn't go against the king's orders. Although the subordinates were worried, they could only respectfully accept the order and unwillingly leave. After the subordinates left, the Qinglong calmly looked at the King of Darkness.
Was it you?
No, denied the King of Darkness. The Qinglong stared at the King of Darkness for a long time. He didn't say whether he believed him or not. He pulled out his sword and indifferently said, "You want to get rid of me? King of Darkness, are you prepared to pay the price?"
Thank you.
The King of Darkness took a step forward. His aura rose rapidly. In the next moment, he turned into a gray light and instantly arrived in the palace. The palm and the sword clashed. The king's sword and the king's ring clashed, giving off a dazzling light. After a moment of stalemate, the long and narrow blade appeared. It was sharp and threatening. The king's sword changed its direction and blocked the deadly blade light. Then, it turned its palm and blocked the King of Darkness's powerful palm energy. With a loud bang, the palace trembled. The array patterns collapsed. It couldn't withstand the power of the 3 top cultivators and quickly scattered. Seeing that the opponent was extraordinary, the butterfly in the flower flashed. She used strange steps, and her blade moved strangely. Her blade was extremely fast. She had never seen anything like this before. This strange martial art was astonishing. Bai Chungkong was fighting against 2 people at the same time. He was more focused than ever. The king's sword was magnificent and didn't want to back down. Outside the palace, the red-robed man in the sky gathered and watched the battle quietly. The king fought bravely and was unshakable. With the king's sword and the king's ring, the undefeatable king didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. "King of Darkness, are you still not going to use your full strength?" Ning Chen watched the battle and mumbled to himself. The butterfly in the flower would only use half of her strength. She couldn't use her full strength. The key to this battle was still the King of Darkness. In the palace, the blade, the sword, and the palm clashed again. The shockwaves spread and forced the 3 to back off. "Bai Chungkong, I'm sorry." The King of Darkness exerted force on his feet. The stone floor under the palace crumbled and rose up. In the next moment, a terrifying pressure spread out. A black divine weapon that looked like a blade and a sword appeared. Its oppressive aura stirred up the clouds above the palace. The king's weapon that hadn't appeared for 100 years had appeared again. Falling clouds Gufei. Seeing the divine weapon appear, the king's sword moved like the wind and emitted a dazzling green light. A resplendent sword light streaked across the palace towards the King of Darkness. The King of Darkness held his weapon and attacked. The divine weapon shook the king's sword. Suddenly, a dazzling red color dripped down the palace. "King of Darkness, you've lost." The blade appeared silently and was an inch away from the king's throat. It was cold and sharp like a poisonous snake. It seemed like it could devour someone at any moment. "The winner takes all. I have nothing to say. Let's fight." The King of Darkness' body stiffened but soon relaxed. He glanced at the 2 and said calmly, Chapter 455. In one night, The Dark King had attacked, the Azure King had been defeated, and the Violet King's ring had been lost. News of this quickly spread to the Violet King Palace. The Violet King, who was taking care of Han Wulei, immediately changed her expression. Without a doubt, after the Azure King, the Dark King's next target would be her. She couldn't just sit and wait for death. But she didn't understand why the Dark King, who had endured for over 10 years, would suddenly attack the Azure King. King, someone has broken into the palace. Just as the urgent report was heard, a figure in red flashed. In an instant, he was already in the hall. He glanced at the beautiful figure on the bed and said calmly, "Wulei, go back with young master." Impudent. The Violet King was infuriated. She slapped out a palm. Ningchen snorted and dodged her palm. He clenched his right hand, and the Yama King appeared. His sword slashed down, and a fierce gale shot out. The Violet King flipped her palm, and her true chi surged, blocking the sharp sword light. What is the meaning of this? The Violet King stood in front of the bed, looking at the red-robed youth. "I'm taking my maid back. That's a matter of course. I don't think I need your permission." Ningchen raised his sword and looked at Han Wulei. "Wulei, the Azure King is already dead. You've already avenged your father. Don't throw a tantrum. Return with the young master." Hearing this, Han Wulei, who was on the bed, trembled and raised his head. His eyes were filled with disbelief. "Return with me." Ning Chen's gaze gradually turned cold. Han Wulei's body trembled once more. A look of struggle appeared on her face. In the end, she suppressed her fear and trembled as she stood up, wanting to walk over. "Wulei, don't listen to him. He's lying to you," said the Violet Emperor anxiously, blocking the way. "Violet King, don't challenge my patience. Since you saved Wulei once, let me take her away today. Then everything will be settled," said Ningchen calmly. Wishful thinking. The Violet King's expression turned cold. The ground shook, and a divine halberd slowly rose into the air. When it appeared in his hand, the wind howled and violet lightning crackled. "Originally, I didn't plan to fight today. But now, it seems that I have no choice but to fight." The green elemental king ring appeared in Ning Chen's hand. He waved his hand, and a green king's sword appeared. The king ring was embedded in it, and a powerful aura surged. The reappearance of the king weapon shook the entire palace. "I'm not late, right?" As he spoke, a cold wind blew by. A beautiful figure in blue with bare feet slowly walked over. The long and narrow embroidered knife in her hand was longer than half her body. She didn't hide her killing intent at all. It was cold and threatening. In the meeting of the top 3, the air pressure in the surroundings gradually dropped. The stifling atmosphere made it hard for people to breathe. Just as the great battle was about to begin, Han Wulei walked forward and reached out to stop Redcoat. He pointed at himself and then at the latter. What he meant was, "I'll go with you." "No." The Purple King was enraged. He grabbed Han Wulei and refused to back down. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. It seemed that he had gone overboard. "Wulei, don't be fooled by him. The Green King isn't your father's murderer. The Dark King is. He's colluding with the Dark King. If you go with him, you'll die," raged the Purple King. Han Wulei was startled. He looked at the former, then at Redcoat. At this moment, he didn't know who to trust. "Ha?" Ningchen smiled and casually said, "Did I kill the wrong person? That really is regretful. Purple King, how about we also make a deal?" "What deal?" asked the Purple King. "Kill the Dark King, and the King Ring will be mine. You can also take revenge for the Red King," said Ningchen. "Why should I trust you?" asked the Purple King unhappily. "Easy." Ningchen tossed the King's sword to Han Wulei. "Kill the Dark King and return the green elemental King Ring and King Sword to me. Is that enough sincerity?" "You really are a businessman." The Purple King's eyes flashed coldly. "Everyone chases after profit. There are no eternal friends, nor are there eternal enemies. There are only eternal benefits. I'm just doing what I should do." Ning Chen's lips curled up. "When?" asked the Purple King calmly. "Tonight. I'll bring the Dark King here." I'm sure the Purple King doesn't need to worry about me doing anything, said Ning Chen. I'll be waiting, said the Purple King. Senior apprentice sister, let's go. Ning Chen said before he turned around and walked out of the hall. Hua Zhongde nodded and followed after him. Within the hall, Han Wulei stared blankly at the two of them. Her heart throbbed with pain. Don't look. He's just using you as a chess piece to disturb the relationship between the three kings. Such a heartless person isn't worth your grief, advised the Purple King gently. Han Wulei looked back at the king's sword in her hand. Her eyes were filled with confusion. Was that really the case? Outside Redbud Imperial City, Hua Zhongde looked at the silent Ning Chen and asked, What are you thinking about? Won't the culprit be found tonight? I'm thinking about that girl Wulei. She seems to have noticed something, sighed Ning Chen. It's not strange. She's been by your side for so long. It's impossible that she didn't notice anything strange, said Hua Zhongde with a smile. Be careful tonight. The Dark King's strength is unfathomable. He's not easy to deal with, reminded Ning Chen. Yes. Hua Zhongde replied softly and said, The Violet King isn't someone easy to deal with in the Redbud Imperial Palace as well. Looks like if we want to draw them out, at least one of us will have to suffer some injuries. It's worth it, Ning Chen said calmly. Now that the Azure King was in trouble, the two kings couldn't back down. After waiting for so long, it was finally time to reel in the net. Within the Dark King's palace, the Dark King stood in the hall, looking at the scenery outside. His expression was calm, without the slightest ripple. King. A blue-robed strategist walked forward. Looking at the king in the hall, worry flashed across his face. He said, My king, do you really want to go? That young man's goal is clearly the Four Kings' ring. Such a person can't be trusted. Businessmen pursue profit. He wants the king's ring, and I want the Purple King's life. It's fair and just. As for what kind of person he is, that's not important, said the Dark King slowly. My king, have you thought about what will happen after the Purple King dies? He already has the Azure King's ring, and with that woman, he's not any weaker than you. If he also obtains the Purple King's ring, even you will have a hard time suppressing them, said the strategist worriedly. I know. There's no need to say more, said the Dark King calmly. He had waited for more than 10 years. He didn't want to wait any longer. This young man couldn't be trusted. However, their relationship was never stable. Once they defeated the Purple King, their cooperation would immediately end. Even if they met, he wasn't completely defenseless. In the Redbud Imperial Palace, the sky gradually darkened, and the lanterns were lit. Han Wulei looked at the king's ring and king's sword in her hands. Her beautiful eyes became more and more confused. She couldn't tell which face was the prince's real face. What was he thinking? In the Three-Flower Palace, the Purple King was resting with her eyes closed. She was making her final preparations for tonight's battle. Although she didn't fear anyone in the Redbud Imperial Palace, she also knew that the Dark King wasn't easy to deal with. Furthermore, the red-robed young man had a businessman's nature. He pursued profit above all else. He was fickle and heartless. He wasn't easy to deal with either. 3 palaces, 3 people, 3 different thoughts. They didn't trust each other. Tonight, no one would know who was scheming against whom and who would obtain the final victory. When midnight arrived, a blue-robed figure appeared in the Redbud Imperial Palace. The Dark King walked over after her. Looking at her, he frowned. Is he still not going to act this time? The Purple King is a careful person. He'll definitely have some tricks up his sleeve. Junior apprentice brother will secretly pay attention in case something unexpected happens, said Hua Zhongde. Hearing that, the Dark King didn't say anything else. In this situation, neither of them could completely trust the other. It wasn't strange for them to keep each other's trump cards. In the Three-Flower Palace, a maple leaf fell. The red-robed young man appeared and then disappeared. The Purple King opened his eyes. After receiving the warning, his expression gradually became serious. Had he come? Suddenly, the white light poured down like a waterfall. The extremely fast saber, without any sound, was closing in on his life. The Purple King leaned to the side, avoiding the saber light. Immediately after, he turned his palm and condensed yuan, slapping down the figure that had suddenly appeared. Hua Zhongdia's saber moved in the opposite direction. It didn't meet the attack head-on. Instead, it moved away as soon as it came into contact. The saber's movements were crafty and crafty. The Purple King focused and avoided the annihilation-killing light. His palms surged like a sea, forcibly shaking off the battle. Purple lightning shatters the city. The divine halberd appeared, and the king's ring was inserted. Boundless divine might surged in all directions. The Purple King gripped the halberd and used it to shatter the city. Hua Zhongdia met the attack head-on. The saber and halberd collided, and the shockwaves rippled out. The palace's formation was instantly destroyed and dissipated. After a moment of deadlock, a dark figure flashed past. A divine weapon that seemed like a saber but wasn't a saber. It seemed like a sword but wasn't a sword. However, it flickered with the coldest black light. The instant it streaked across the battlefield, the space 30 meters around it cracked open. Seeing that, the Purple King's expression sank. His halberd shook off the saber and met the Dark Yuan King weapon. When the King weapons collided, a shocking explosion occurred. The Purple King retreated half a step. His blood chi was churning. He was at a disadvantage. Purple King, pay with your life. The Dark King's expression was extremely grave. His divine weapon condensed yuan chi. He took a step forward, and his body shot forward. The Purple King retreated half a step to avoid the Dark Yuan King weapon. Immediately after, he turned around and exchanged a few moves. In the blink of an eye, the halberd broke through the sky. Hua Zhongdia saw that and used her saber to block the halberd. However, with a bang, she was forced back a few steps. Blood dripped onto her blue clothes. Hua Zhongdia had been injured for the first time facing a king. Outside the palace, Ning Chen calmly watched the battle, waiting for the best opportunity to attack. The ending would only be known at the very end. However, the process in the middle was also very important. Whether or not Hua Zhongdia could perform the first half of the play was very important. The battle in the palace was becoming more and more intense. The Dark King was powerful, but the Purple King was also not easy to deal with. The two kings had exchanged 100 moves, but it was still difficult to determine a victor. This move will send you to the underworld to repent for your sins. Seeing that the battle was in a deadlock, the Purple King circulated his true yuan. His halberd condensed the power of the 8 directions. Thunder roared, and the wind and clouds churned. His halberd broke through the 3-flower palace. The King of Darkness's face darkened. The divine weapon in his hand also transformed into vast origin energy, reaching the peak of the King realm. Black light illuminated the 9 heavens, parting the clouds and revealing the moon. The moment the two attacks collided, the saber light changed direction and pierced through the Dark King's chest. "You!" The Dark King groaned. His eyes were filled with anger. Enduring the pain in his chest, he forcefully counterattacked with his full power. The blue clothes blocked the attack. But with a bang, the blue clothes were sent flying. When they landed, they staggered and vomited blood. Chapter 456. The sudden attack heavily injured the Dark King, and he sent Hua Zhongdia flying with a palm. The Violet King's attack followed, and a terrifying aura swept through the 300-meter area. The entire 3-flower palace collapsed and rapidly vanished. Facing the incoming killing move, the King of Darkness was enraged. He raised his weapon and channeled all of his energy into it. Black chi spread out endlessly. It looked like a blade, but not a sword. The 100-meter-long sandstorm clashed with the Purple King's killing move. The Dark King was the most mysterious king of the current world's 4 kings. His crown shattered, and his black hair danced in the wind. He shot forward, instantly arriving in front of the injured Hua Zhongdia. His king item seemed like a saber, but not a sword. At this critical moment, the Yama King's divine sword appeared, and a cold violet light blocked the fatal attack. "Why?" The Dark King only had one question for one answer. He looked at the person in front of him, his face filled with killing intent. There's no reason. If you die, your king item and king ring will be mine. Unfortunately, that attack missed, said Ning Chen indifferently. Crafty little bastards, you'll experience the Dark King's fury. The King of Darkness didn't hide the anger in his eyes anymore. It was like a blade, but not a sword. His Grand Yuan was extremely vast. The black chi started to spiral rapidly. In the next moment, the sky above the palace was covered with dark clouds. Lightning flashed and thunder rolled. Senior apprentice sister, you should retreat and heal, said Ning Chen calmly. Be careful. Red Butterfly nodded and dragged her injured body away from the battlefield. Violet King, I've already shown my sincerity. Now it's your turn, said Ning Chen gravely as he looked at the furious Dark King. The two of you can go to hell together. The Dark King took a step forward, and the ground around him split apart. His Peak King aura shook heaven and earth. His divine weapon slashed down with unstoppable momentum. The Purple King knew that he could not hesitate any longer. With a flip of his palm, he activated the fate of the Purple Thorns Royal City. In an instant, endless purple chi gathered on the divine halberd. With a swing of the halberd, he resisted the king's might. This was the most extreme battle between kings. Their ultimate moves collided, and the shockwaves caused space to twist and collapse. Cracks spread out for thousands of meters. The two kings retreated in unison amidst the violent winds and raging waves. The corners of their mouths turned red. The King of Darkness covered the wound on his chest. Blood flowed out from the wound and dyed his clothes red. The strongest king had encountered the greatest danger of his life. Just at this moment, a purple light flashed past, and an extremely fast sword appeared in front of him in an instant. It was fast, ruthless, and accurate. There were no tricks, and each sword was deadly, without the slightest bit of mercy. The Dark King Tiyuan fought again, blocking the extremely fast sword light. Suddenly, he staggered, and his consciousness became dizzy. There was poison on his saber. At this moment, the Dark King finally sensed the abnormality in his body. He raised his head and looked at the person in front of him. Despicable. Thank you for the compliment. Ning Chen snorted coldly and moved again. In a flash, he waved his sword to block the attack. At the same time, the Violet King waved his halberd and attacked. Amidst the purple chi, lightning crackled. It was so powerful that it suppressed the invincible king's weapon. With the two of them working together, the heavily injured and poisoned King of Darkness finally couldn't hold on any longer. He retreated again and again, and the dizziness in his head kept assaulting him. He could faint at any moment. Knowing that he couldn't drag this out any longer, the King of Darkness suppressed the dizziness in his head and forcefully raised his Jun Yuan to gamble on his final move. His Jun Yuan erupted, and a black chi appeared on the king weapon. Endless undercurrents soared into the sky, covering all the light in the world. The world of darkness instantly became devoid of any light. It was as if the world had died. Yellow Spring's falling sun. How can I save life? Within the darkness, the King of Darkness' only weapon seemed like a saber, but it wasn't a sword. It gathered the energy of the world of darkness, and with a single move, it cut open the sky and opened the path to the Yellow Springs. The Violet King waved his halberd and condensed his Jun Yuan. Boundless purple chi surrounded him, forming a protective barrier that blocked the king's final move. With a muffled groan, the Violet King was knocked back several meters. Blood spurted out of his right chest, dyeing the ground red. After the ultimate move, the world of darkness gradually dissipated. Heaven and earth returned to normal. Within the surging sand, the King of Darkness looked ahead with unwillingness before collapsing. Violet King, so the King of Darkness's hatred for you is even greater than his betrayal of me. Ning Chen walked up and took the king weapon from the King of Darkness's hand. The final move had actually been aimed at the Violet King alone. Otherwise, even he wouldn't have been able to escape unscathed. I'll leave this person's life to you. But before that, Shouldn't you return the Azure Origin King Sword and King Ring to me? Ningchen looked at the Violet King and smiled. The Violet King suppressed his injuries and opened his eyes. He looked at the youth in front of him and said, "Thank you for your help this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get revenge for the Red King by myself." "We both took what we needed," smiled Ningchen. The Violet King nodded and didn't say anything more. He transmitted, "Wulei, hand over the King's sword and King Ring." Not long after, Han Wulei appeared with the King weapon. He looked at the youth in front of him and handed over the King weapon. "Wulei, do you want to return with the young master?" Ningchen opened his mouth, but before he could finish speaking, a palm landed on his back. Han Wulei's pupils shrank. His eyes were completely red. The red-robed figure fell to the ground with a bang. Blood dripped from his mouth, dyeing the ground in front of him red. The Violet King's expression was no longer gentle and dignified. Instead, it was ice-cold. She walked up step by step and bent down to pick up the Black King weapon. Then she looked at the red-robed youth and indifferently said, "How is it? The feeling of being betrayed isn't bad, right?" "It's you." Ningchen spat out a mouthful of blood. "It's too late to realize that now." The Violet King turned and looked at Han Wulei. He calmly said, "Wulei, give me the King's sword and King Ring." "Oh, right, and the Red Origin King Ring." Han Wulei recovered from his shock and retreated several steps. He didn't know what to do. "You won't give it to me? Then I'll take it myself," the Violet King said coldly. Then he took a step forward and arrived in front of Yi Futian. With a flip of his palm, Yi Futian gathered Yuan with a single palm strike. In that moment of crisis, Han Wulei flashed in front of him. The Yama King unsheathed his sword and slashed out, forcibly blocking the Violet King's palm. With a bang, Han Wulei retreated half a step. Taking advantage of the momentum, he moved to the side. "You're actually fine?" The Violet King narrowed his eyes. "I don't like leaving my back to people I don't trust." "Does the Violet King think you're trustworthy?" Ningchen's lips curled into a cold smile. With a flip of his palm, the black tortoise heart armor flew out from his back and landed in his hand. The black tortoise heart armor, which had always been indestructible, actually had cracks on it at this moment. The Purple King's palm was truly shocking. "Girl, back up a bit. After this fight, I'll apologize to you," said Ningchen warmly to Wulei. Han Wulei nodded with tears in his eyes and obediently withdrew from the battle. Ningchen waved his hand, sending the unconscious Dark King out of the battle. This king was truly shockingly powerful. Fortunately, Senior Apprentice Sister Dai's medicine was tyrannical enough. The Violet King icily watched the scene. Pointless struggle. "With just you, you won't be able to escape death today." "Is that so? What if I'm included?" Azure light condensed in the sky, and the azure-robed king walked out. His powerful aura was as dazzling as a divine furnace. "Azure King." The Violet King's eyes sank. He turned to the red-robed youth and icily asked, "When did you begin to suspect me?" "From the start. You've always been the person I couldn't trust the most," said Ningchen calmly. "Is that so?" "Not a bad plan. Unfortunately, you'll still lose without a doubt." As he spoke, the Purple King plunged his halberd into the ground and absorbed the strange power of the dragon vein beneath the palace. Purple chi surged out like an ocean and entered the divine halberd. The terrifying pressure caused the ground to sink, shaking the heavens and earth. "Qing Yuan." The Azure King's expression froze. He clenched his right hand, and the king's ring and king's sword flew out from Han Wulei's hand. Ningchen moved at the same time. His body turned into a blur, and his sword cut through the wind and clouds.
Ha!
The Violet King's palms collided with the two swords. He no longer held back his cultivation base, raising it to its peak. The three of them retreated at the same time. The Violet King flipped his palm and raised his halberd. Amidst the rumbling of thunder, he once again attacked. Purple rainbow piercing the sun. The purple rainbow shot toward the two of them. The Azure King focused, and his king's sword's power soared. He used 3 swords to block the Violet King's ultimate attack. Sword style. At the same time, Ning Chen activated Yama's sword. Bloody light shone around him, and his sword cut through the air, helping the Azure King. Sword light and halberd light collided, and killing light surged. The three of them were dyed red, and their blood did not stop flowing. Hong Yi instantly turned back, and his sword moved at an extreme speed, blocking the Violet King's opportunity to attack. The sword and halberd collided at an extremely fast speed. With a piercing sound, the Violet King's left shoulder was torn apart, and blood flowed out. The king's expression became angry, and he resisted the sword head-on. He urged his vast origin energy to move mountains and overturn seas. The Azure King leaped forward, and his king's sword gathered thousands of cyan lights to block the Violet King's attack. With a loud bang, heaven and earth tilted. The combination of speed and power fought the Violet King, who was supported by the Dragon Vein. The battle was in a stalemate, and it was difficult to determine the outcome. The Violet King's face gradually showed impatience. He flipped his left palm, and a scarlet light rose. A bright red furnace appeared. After 14 years, the Red Origin King artifact reappeared in the world. Seeing the King artifact appear again, Hong Wulei's body trembled, and his eyes filled with tears. "Be careful." The Azure King's expression froze.
Yes.
Ning Chen nodded. He clenched his left hand, and a fiendish saber appeared. The Grand Elder had said that the Red King's King artifact had played an important role in making him the leader of the four kings. "Now, I'll show you the scenery of hell."
Ha!
The Violet King activated the Red Origin King artifact in his left hand. Scarlet light immediately illuminated the world, and a bloody hell rapidly spread. A mountain-like pressure descended, and hell appeared in the world. The Azure King and Ning Chen immediately felt their bodies sink. Their cultivation techniques were severely restricted. At this moment, a barefoot figure walked into the battle. A long, black saber appeared in her hand. The bells on the saber jingled like the tears of a saber. They had never heard of such a strange divine weapon. Even Ning Chen was seeing it for the first time. Flower burial tears. Seeing the divine weapon in her hand, the Violet King's pupils constricted, and his expression changed. Chapter 457. The appearance of the flower burial ground shocked the kings. The divine weapon that had disappeared for hundreds of years had appeared again today, revealing the identity of the newcomer. Saber God, butterfly in the flower. Her face changed. A beautiful face appeared, but at this moment, it was as cold as ice. "All right, the two of you can rest. Leave this person to me." Butterfly and the flower burial flower glanced at the two of them. Emperor Qing recovered from his shock and looked at the red-robed young man beside him with a questioning look in his eyes. At this time, it's best to listen to her. Ning Chen's saber and sword disappeared. He turned and left the battlefield. It was clear that this demoness had been enduring for a long time. At this moment, he didn't want to provoke her. The Azure King narrowed his eyes and walked out of the battlefield. He had heard of Saber God's name for a long time, but this was his first time seeing him. The butterfly in the flower was just like her name. She was more beautiful than the flower, but her saber was more beautiful than the butterfly. Butterfly in the flower burial flower looked at the purple-robed king and said indifferently, "What we fought before doesn't count. Let's start over." Butterfly in the flower, "We have no enmity. Why must you get involved in this mess?" The purple king's eyes flashed with fear as he spoke in a deep voice. "Only I can bully the fool behind me. You'll have to pay for that palm with your life," said Butterfly in the flower burial flower. Arrogant. The Violet King was infuriated. He didn't say anything else. Stomping his foot, his halberd unleashed a force that could shatter mountains. Wind and thunder converged as he slashed down with his halberd, causing the clouds to turn chaotic. The heavenly might shook the mountains and split the seas. Ning Chen, watch carefully. I'll only show you this once. Butterfly in the flower burial flowers, tears shone with a black light. Frost fell from the sky, and flowers bloomed on the ground. Red, orange, yellow, green, 100 colors bloomed. Frost sky burial flower, 100 colors of mountains and rivers. A beautiful blue figure flew out of the beautiful ice flowers. The saber slashed, and the butterfly danced. A red streak fell, and the frost stopped. No, impossible. The purple king's eyes were filled with disbelief. In the next moment, a bloody mist gushed out from his throat, obscuring his final line of sight. Her unwilling body fell to the ground, filled with regret that she could not believe until the end. Green bamboo snake, a woman's heart, will not rest until death. In the past 100 years, there had always been a legend in the 4 regions. It was said that there was a female devil who used a blade in the Central Plains. Her strength was no less than that of a human sovereign, but no one knew whether it was true or not. Now that they had seen it for themselves, they were all shocked. After the battle was over, Hua Zhongdia turned around and walked over to the two of them. She glanced at the Azure King and said indifferently, "Pretend you didn't see anything today." The Azure Sovereign's cold tone didn't hide his killing intent at all. The Azure Sovereign's body tensed up. After a moment, he recovered and nodded. After getting the answer, Hua Zhongdia looked at the young man in red in front of her. Her cold face disappeared, and she smiled like a blooming flower. She put her arms around the young man's neck and asked, "Junior brother, am I powerful?" "Amazing." Ning Chun hurriedly nodded his head. The cold sweat on his back had yet to dissipate. He had always known that this demoness was very powerful. However, it was only now that he realized what true valiance was. "Then in the future, will you listen to what I say?" Hua Zhongdia's smile became even more brilliant. "Listen." Ning Chen nodded decisively again. "Good boy." Hua Zhongdia happily pinched his face. Normally, this fellow was like an old monster, neither happy nor sad. That was a huge blow to her. Today, she had finally gotten back some face. "Little girl, come here." Hua Zhongdia looked at Hong Wulei and beckoned her over. Hearing the former's beckoning, Hong Wulei first trembled and then quickly walked over. "Junior brother, hurry up and apologize." "I'm waiting." Hua Zhongdia giggled. Ning Chun helplessly flipped his hand, and the red origin king ring appeared. He immediately grabbed Hong Wulei's hand and placed the king ring in her hand. "Little girl, I'll apologize to you. But only this time. There won't be a next time." Tears unconsciously flowed down Hong Wulei's face. In less than a month, she had cried half her life's worth of tears. The excitement of regaining what she had lost made her unable to control herself. She took the king ring and took a step forward, tightly hugging her young master and crying silently. Ning Chen gently patted her head and sighed. Fortunately, it wasn't too late to apologize this time. "All right, you've apologized. Don't take advantage of your young master. Only I can take advantage of him." Seeing her junior brother being taken advantage of by someone else, Hua Zhongdia was very unhappy. She pulled the little girl away from a certain someone's embrace. Ning Chen helplessly smiled. This demoness face really changed faster than flipping a book. Hong Wulei wiped away the tears on her face. She pointed at herself and then pointed at Hua Zhongdia. She made a sign that the latter couldn't understand. Seeing this, Hua Zhongdia was confused. Was this girl scolding her? "Wulei says thank you." Ning Chun understood and translated. "How did you know?" Hua Zhongdia was puzzled. Even she couldn't understand. So how did he know? "High comprehension is also one of my strong points." Ning Chen smiled. Hua Zhongdia wasn't happy, but she couldn't refute him. Although this fellow's strength was only SOSO, his brain was frighteningly smart. This was the first time she had seen such a freak in all these years. Ning Chen glanced at the blood-red cauldron floating in the air. He waved his right hand and took the king weapon. He handed it to Hong Wulei and said softly, "The red origin king weapon's power is extraordinary. It far surpasses the other 3 king weapons." The purple king didn't have the king's ring, so he couldn't unleash the full power of the king's weapon. That's why he lost so miserably. Your father put in a lot of effort and didn't hesitate to give the king's ring to you. Ning Chen paused for a moment before continuing. Also, Yi Jia isn't dead yet. However, I won't interfere in this matter. Whether or not you can defeat this person will depend on yourself. Han Wulei nodded and remembered every word that the young master said to her. After that, Ning Chen turned and looked at the Qing King, who was currently healing the Dark King. Qing King, thank you for your help today. It was nothing. How can I cure the Dark King's poison? Asked the Qing King. Here. Hua Zhongdia stepped forward and took out a pile of jade bottles from her bosom. She threw them over and said, I forgot which bottle is the antidote, but you'll be fine if you take the other pills. Try them all. Hearing this, the Qing King's forehead was covered in cold sweat again. However, he didn't dare to say anything. He took the antidotes in front of him and tried them one by one. After testing a pile of antidotes, the poison in the Dark King's body was cured. His injuries were no longer serious. The four of them left with the Dark King. Although this battle had ended, there were still many things to be done. 5 days later, in the Dark King's palace, the two of them said goodbye. The Dark King personally sent them off. He looked at the red-clothed young man beside him and said calmly, Wulei told me to tell you that she's going into seclusion to absorb the Red Origin King item's power. Therefore, she won't be coming to send you off. Ning Chen nodded and didn't say anything. He glanced at the woman beside him and said, Senior sister, let's go. Okay. Butterfly and the flower responded softly and left with the former. Within the palace, the Dark King watched the two of them leave. After a long time, he sighed and said, Wulei, they're already far away.
Come out.
A red-clothed figure walked out from behind the palace. Looking at their departing figures, tears silently dripped from her eyes. Girl, if you want to help him, you have to quickly absorb the Red Origin King item's power, said the Dark King softly. Han Wulei nodded and clenched her fists. Her gaze became resolute. She would cultivate well. There would be a day when she would no longer be a burden to her master. The two of them walked side by side through the wilderness. It had already been a month since they left the academy. It was about time for them to return. After walking for an entire day, the sun began to set. Just as the two of them were about to stop and rest, an azure bird flew over and landed in front of them. Something has happened at the academy. Return quickly, said the azure bird. The academy head's voice rang out in their ears. His voice was filled with worry. Hua Zhongdia's expression changed. Without saying anything, she pulled Ning Chen and immediately flew back to Whitefoot Academy. In the wilderness, two figures flashed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Before anyone could see them clearly, they had already disappeared into the night. At Whitefoot Academy, a great battle had begun. Outside the array, a white-clothed man stood in the void. Behind him, tens of thousands of beasts stepped out of the primordial land and continuously attacked the academy's array. Among the beasts, 9 wild beasts stood out. One of them was the silver leopard that Ning Chen had fought in the primordial land. 1 energy-shaping realm, 9 quasi-energy-shaping realm, and hundreds of thousands of powerful wild beasts formed a terrifying lineup. The atmosphere of the entire area was oppressive. Yao Qilua, this is the second time you've provoked the academy. Have you forgotten the agreement between the human world and the primordial land? Yi Qingqiu looked at the white-clothed man in front of her and said in a low voice, Agreement? Ha, it's been too long. Yao Qilua smiled faintly. With a flip of her right hand, her palm energy swept out. In an instant, heaven and earth collapsed. The terrifying power shocked everyone in the academy. Yi Qingqiu stepped forward and stood in front of the array. Similarly, she struck out with her palm and blocked the demon lord's attack. The academy was in danger. The old gatekeeper, the 3 seniors of the academy on the 2nd floor of the Jingluan Pavilion, and the scholar on the 1st floor all walked out and appeared in front of the array. They no longer concealed their aura. Vast amounts of true vitality corresponded and strengthened the array. Only you guys? Looks like the academy that forced me to enter the mountain has also declined. Yao Qilua glanced at the 5 of them. A hint of mockery flashed in her eyes as she said, 100 miles west of White Sovereign City, a young man in a purple and red robe stopped. He looked at the dark clouds in the distance and frowned slightly. At this moment, a black-clothed guard appeared and said respectfully, "Fourth Prince, the primitive emperor summons you back to the palace immediately." Yi Xuanmiao frowned again. He took 2 steps forward and disappeared. "Go back and report to my father that I'll be back soon." At the same time, 100 miles north of the academy, 2 figures sped past. They were getting faster and faster. The academy was in danger, and the primordial land was making trouble. No one knew if it was a coincidence or something else, but in White Sovereign City, orders were issued one after another, summoning all the princes and servants in the nearby cities. In the central heavenly court of Mizar Imperial Palace, the primitive emperor sat cross-legged in the endless purple fate. His cultivation level was constantly rising. With the help of the fate of the dynasty, he was once again trying to break through to the human sovereign realm. Chapter 458. In the Bailu Academy, the formation trembled as the primitive land launched a large-scale attack. The continuous attacks put the academy in a precarious situation. In the sky above the academy, the human sovereigns and the energy-shaping realm demon lords engaged in an intense battle. The sky and earth were in danger as the space within 100 miles twisted continuously. Below, the gatekeeper, the 3 seniors on the 2nd floor of the Jingluan Pavilion, and the scholar on the 1st floor worked together to stop the 9 quasi-energy-shaping realm wild beasts. They were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, and the situation was getting out of hand. At the moment of crisis, a sorrowful sword appeared in the distance. In an instant, a purple-red figure walked into the battle. With a turn of the sword, several beams of sword light shot out, forcing the 3 demon kings back. His eyes were cold and emotionless. His sword danced with a blue radiance. He was like Wu Dai in the wind, proud and unyielding, handsome and extraordinary. 4th Prince. In the academy, many disciples of the nobles recognized the attacker. Yi Xuanmiao was the most talented among the dozen or so princes of the Kaiyang imperial city. He was named the crown prince and had the right to inherit the throne. However, he had no interest in the throne and had never participated in the fight for it. The leader of the 9 kings, Silver Leopard, saw this and turned into a flash of white light, rushing towards the 4th prince of the Kaiyang imperial dynasty. Cyan Moth Reverse Rainbow. The cyan moth sword in Yi Xuanmiao's hand turned around. The tough sword twisted and turned like a blue waterfall, wrapping around Silver Leopard's claws. In an instant, the soft sword turned into an extremely tough weapon, stabbing into Silver Leopard's stomach, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The unique sword was both tough and soft. Silver Leopard did not expect this, and was injured in one move. The situation of the battle changed. The other 8 demon kings sensed this, and immediately split up to fight the 4th prince together. Yi Xuanmiao's expression did not change at all when the 2 demon kings worked together. The blue sword hummed, suddenly tough and soft. One sword was strong, the other skillful. It trapped the 2 demon kings and was not at a disadvantage at all. In the sky, Yao Qilua sensed the change in the battle below and frowned. Her figure flashed, and her palm formed a destructive force that fell from the sky. Yi Xuanmiao looked up with a serious expression. His soft sword turned into a divine blade, spinning into the sky to block the killing intent falling from the sky. At this moment, a beautiful blue figure appeared. A black blade slashed through the sky. With a loud explosion, the 9 heavens collapsed. Amidst the raging winds, Butterfly and the flower stood in the void. She looked at the demon venerable in the sky with undisguised killing intent in her eyes. Below, Hong Yi walked over with a sword in hand. Thousands of sword wills surged, and with a single slash, it broke through the mountains and split the sky. The terrifying sword beam roared as it sped forward. Thousands of desolate beasts were instantly killed. The 3 closest Fey kings were alarmed as they opened their mouths to breathe in and out beast essence. They joined forces to block the sword beam. Yao Qilua, Do you still want to fight? Hua Zhongdia held the flower burial tear in her hand and said indifferently, what an extraordinary expert. It was worth it to be able to lure you out. Retreat. Yao Beautiful Luo waved her hand, and the beast kings retreated. The beast horde then retreated in an orderly fashion towards the primitive lands. See you next time. I hope the academy will have such good luck. The beast horde retreated, and Yao Qilua's lips curled up slightly. Her white clothes scattered, and she disappeared. In the sky, I Chingqiu watched the demon Venerable leave. Her eyes flashed with a dignified look. There were signs of chaos in the primordial land. In front of the academy, I Xuanmiao sheathed his sword. He glanced at the red-clothed youth not far away and nodded. Ning Chen also nodded. Although they had not spoken a word during their 2 meetings, the 4th prince of the Kaiyang dynasty had left a deep impression on him. He had a feeling that if he used his full strength, I Xuanmiao's strength might not lose to the primitive emperor. Of course, the primitive emperor had hidden too deeply, and he could not see everything. However, no matter what, the 4th prince's strength was the strongest of the younger generation he had ever seen. 4th prince, thank you for your help. I Chingqiu walked down from the sky and looked at the former with a serious expression. It's nothing, I Xuanmiao calmly replied, and continued, Father has summoned me. Xuanmiao cannot stay any longer.
See you next time. See you next time.
I Chingqiu nodded. I Xuanmiao turned and left. After a few steps, he disappeared without a trace. Ning Chen waved his right hand, and King Yama disappeared. His feet moved, and he also disappeared. Where is he going? I Chingqiu's eyes flashed as she asked. Kaiyang Imperial Palace.
Hua Zhongdia slowly said.
In the sky above the Kaiyang Imperial Palace, Hongyi appeared. Without any delay, she turned her hand and drew her bow. Arrow light directly shot towards the primitive emperor of the central heavenly court. The old eunuch was furious. His horsetail whisk turned into 3,000 silver threads, blocking the arrow light. However, within the arrow light, a sword appeared. The sword fell from the sky, and the entire central heavenly court shook. With a bang, the old eunuch's mouth was overflowing with blood, and he retreated a few steps. After the sword move, the sky-piercing arrow light shot out again. 3 arrows chased after the moon, and the terrifying power shook the heavens and the earth. Rascal, it's you again. A red spear light filled the sky, and the 13th prince appeared. With a heroic appearance, he waved his spear to block the arrows. With a bang, he retreated a step and blocked an arrow. With a piercing sound, the arrow light streaked across I Hongmian's left arm, and blood spurted out, dyeing his clothes red. On the other side of the palace, a man in purple and white clothes silently watched. His eyes were deep and calm, and he had no intention of going forward to help. Crown Prince, an armored guard knelt on the ground and respectfully said, How is it? Asked Yi Chaohui. As Crown Prince expected, the Whitefoot Academy is being attacked by the primitive lands. However, the 4th prince also went, reported the armored guard. 4th brother. Yi Chaohui frowned slightly. His father had summoned all the princes back to the palace. For his 4th brother to go to the academy at this time was undoubtedly openly disobeying. Of all the princes, the one he feared the most was the 4th prince, and the one he was least worried about was his 4th brother. He didn't know what his 4th brother was thinking, but he didn't believe there was someone in this world who didn't care about power. Where's 9th brother? Has he returned? Asked Yi Chaohui. The 9th prince is on his way back to the palace. He should be back before daybreak, said the guard respectfully. Yes, I understand. You can leave, said Yi Chaohui calmly. Yes. The guard bowed and turned to leave. Father, if you become a chosen, how long will I have to wait for this position? Yi Chaohui's gaze grew heavier and heavier. In the central heavenly court, the arrow light was like a rainbow, and the sword intent surged. One after another, it cut through the void, and there was no way to avoid it. The old eunuch and the 13th prince were both stained red, and it was getting harder and harder to block. The invisible opponent was shockingly powerful. Seeing another arrow coming, the 13th prince suddenly staggered. The arrow flew past his right arm and headed straight for the primitive emperor. It was unknown whether it was because he was out of strength or it was done on purpose. However, at this moment, another arrow light cut through the central heavenly court and collided with the arrow light in front of the primitive emperor. The two arrows collided, and the aftermath spread in all directions. The old eunuch reacted, and the horsetail whisk in his hand turned into a barrier, blocking in front of the primitive emperor. The Zhao family. Above the void, Ning Qin narrowed his eyes. It seemed that the primitive emperor was wary of him last time and had reached some kind of agreement with the Zhao family. In the central heavenly court, an old man in blue appeared. His old face was haggard, and in his hand, there was a dark bow that was cold and piercing to the bone. It was very extraordinary. After 10 years, seeing the Zhao family again, Ning Qin didn't dare to be careless. When he was in the Divine Prefecture, he had a general understanding of the Zhao family from Senior Sword Bodhi. Later, when he saw Luo Xingqian, he was even more aware of the terrifying background of this family. His impression of the Zhao family was very ordinary. Even Luo Xingqian, who betrayed the Zhao family, wasn't someone easy to deal with. If it wasn't for the chaos of the Nether King, he would have fought with this freak. The broken death bow was drawn, and the phoenix vitality gathered, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered into a blood-colored arrow light. The next moment, the blood arrow flew out, tearing through the void, and headed straight for the central heavenly court. In front of the primitive emperor, the old man in blue focused and drew his bow. At this moment, a purple-red figure walked over, and after 2 steps, he was in between the two. The green moth was unsheathed, and the sound of a sword rang out. The sword broke the arrow, and the aftermath surged. In the void, Ning Qin put away his bow, no longer attacking, and turned to leave. He rushed to the Mizar Imperial Palace before the 4th prince because he didn't want to confront him head-on. Now that Yixuan Miao had returned, it was impossible for him to attack the primitive emperor again. Below, Yixuan Miao looked at the blurry figure in the darkness and narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. He didn't chase after him. 4th Imperial Brother. The 13th prince stepped forward with a smile on his face. "How's your injury?" Yixuan Miao glanced at the former and asked calmly. "Thank you for your concern, Imperial Brother. Hongmian is fine." The 13th prince responded. "That's good. You stay here, I'm going back." After saying that, Yixuan Miao didn't stop and walked back to his own palace. No one noticed that at this moment, the primitive emperor opened his eyes in the dense, purple mist. Looking at his 4 sons leaving, a complicated look flashed in his eyes. After a short moment, he concealed his emotions and closed his eyes again. This son was the one he valued the most, but also the one he feared the most. Before entering the human sovereign realm, maintaining the current relationship was the best choice. In front of the Bailu Academy, after a great battle, there was a scene of devastation. The teachers of the academy led the students to clean up the corpses outside the academy. In the lake pavilion on the east side of the academy, 2 women sat facing each other, and the atmosphere was a little heavy. "What happened?" Hua Zhongdia asked. "I'm not sure. In the month that you left, the primitive land has been very active. According to my guess, there should be a second energy-shaping realm demon venerable in the primitive land. Otherwise, Yao Qilu alone wouldn't dare to break the agreement between the primitive land and the human realm." Yi Qingqiu said with a heavy expression. "If that's the case, then we're in trouble." Hua Zhongdia said. "There's something more troublesome." Before she finished speaking, a red light gathered, and Ning Qin walked out. Looking at the 2 in the lake pavilion, he said seriously, "The primitive emperor will enter the human sovereign realm soon. We can't stop him anymore. I'll go and kill him." Hearing that, Hua Zhongdia stood up and said in a deep voice. There was already enough trouble now. With the addition of the primitive emperor, the academy's situation was really dangerous. "Don't be rash." Ning Qin shook his head and stopped her. In the central heavenly court, the primitive emperor's strength will be greatly increased. With senior sister's strength, you may be able to defeat him, but it's almost impossible to kill him. Are we just going to sit and wait for death? Hua Zhongdia's eyes flashed coldly. Ning Chun was silent. He walked into the lake pavilion and poured himself a cup of tea and said slowly, "Give me some time to think." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.